through the stairway to heaven, what it begins to activate and open in the body. It helps to understand where the geography is, so you understand where certain currents are coming from, where certain frequencies are coming from. So we're going to start there. I will start with two. The first expression, the Divine Trinity. And the Divine Trinity originally, and the Trinity teachings, were always about the three first forces that God turned itself into in order to create within itself all creation. And the first three forces were the Manu, the Ire, and the Mane. The Manu was the first individuated expression of God. Imagine that God is a field of consciousness and had an idea that it wanted to create and experience individuation. That idea itself was formed of a portion of the substance of the consciousness of God. And that idea was called the Manu, the desire and intention to create. God put a portion of itself, has lots of consciousness here, but put a portion of itself right on that idea and said, I'm going to use this quantity of my consciousness for the creation. First, there was the Manu. In the beginning was the void. The Manu force is what's called the void force. It is the first expression of the consciousness of God. It is eternal. It's not something that goes away. It stays continually. These are the first three expressions of God source that are called the three God forces that all of the other smaller creation currents eventually came out of. So we have the void force, which is the Manu force. That is the non-polarized expression. Next, in the beginning was the void, and within the void God spoke the word. The next was sound, vibration. This is called the Ire force, another portion of God's consciousness. God reserved to create this particular expression of itself, the Ire force. It's also called the Divine Feminine. And from the combination of the sound in the void came the light between them. And that is called the Mane expression of God force, and that is the Divine Masculine. This is where you get Divine Mother, Divine Father, and Divine Spirit, or Holy Spirit. And that was the true original first Trinity before they started playing with it. Now, that first Trinity of expression of God force consciousness actually is the first forces that form the scalar waves that I've talked about, the cosmic scalar waves that form the scalar grids. There's a whole series of things. I'll do this. All right, we can put the next one on. We have the three forces, right? And we go from God and Spirit to science really fast. The three forces. All right, I don't have a pointer here either. It's going to be fun. Yeah, I see. I usually have a pointer, but I lose them so often. I don't have one this time. The three forces can be looked at also this way, in terms of science. If these were eternal, living consciousness, all right, of God, the three forces, the Manu, the Ire, and the Mane, and they expressed as the first units of the consciousness of God. Thank you. Thank you very much. Remind me to give it back to you or it'll get lost. Well, I'm terrible with these. All right. Thank you. He knows me. He's been around for a while. Thank you. All right. Now, standing columnar wave of light. It's columnar, it's standing, but it's not just a full column. It's actually a spherical column. If you look at these as the first three bubbles of creation, you have the void, that is, God's consciousness is like a field that goes way beyond. But within that field, you have the first circle, that would be the Manu force. The first, it's actually an elliptical sphere, scalar standing wave of living, conscious energy. This is before light and sound in the external sense. Within that was created the Ire, which was the first vibration. That's the first pre-sound vibration. This is the field. There's another spherical, standing, elliptical sphere, standing scalar waveform. And from those two, this was actually like inside there, this one emerged, which would be the Mane force. When we take this into science, divine science, and understanding the scalar waveforms themselves that are the living expressions of the consciousness of God, and they are the substance, the primal substance that everything manifest is created of. People say, well, I have to go find God. You're made of God. We are made of these units of consciousness. The first ones were the massive fields of pre-light and pre-sound and pre-movement. Manu would be the stillness, the still point. Then you have the Ire, which is the pre-sound, and you have the Mane, which is the pre-light. If you can think of those as huge bubbles that everything else lives within, all creation takes place in there, and we'll see inside of those what actually exists. This is where we find out when we do the Stairway to Heaven where the words Christos came from, where the word Christ came from. They came out of two words that were spelled with a K originally, at least on the top level. They're spelled with a K because that has a different vibrational signature than a C does. But the Christos and the Christalla were the first templates that were used to form the creation, and we'll get into that a little bit. But when we talk about templates, if we can understand that the three forces, the three living, conscious, eternal God forces that everything is made out of, take on the form of scalar standing waves that begin as a cycling of units of the consciousness of God. It starts with what are called Partakai units. Now, Partakai units would be units that are the carriers. They're standing scalar waves. They make up the scalar wave grid within those three primal force spheres of energy. The Partakai is the carrier of the Manu force. And the Partakai unit, in terms of science, cycles. It's a scalar wave that flashes off and on. When it flashes, when it's in its flash stage, it flashes on and becomes a Partakai unit, which is a light unit, turns into Mane. When it flashes, then it cycles into Ire, goes from light to sound, back again. They actually happen at the same time. Light and sound are created at the same time, just like when I was speaking about the first creation where we had Manu and the Ire and the Mane. It's actually the Manu was created, and then within the Manu, the Ire and the Mane simultaneously emerged. The Ire was created, but simultaneously the Mane came from the combination of the Manu and the Ire. So when we take it into science, when we take it into the behavior of ultra-micro particles, because what these units of the consciousness of God are in terms of science, they are literally particles that would be so tiny, the building blocks of the particles, things like quarks and those kind of things. These are the smaller things behind those, that these things are built, that the things science is finding now are built on. Science has not found the smallest particles that exist. Waveforms that are the basis for these templates, these standing scalar waves that are the carriers of the living God force consciousness. Science doesn't even remember they exist. And there's a whole movement that has been here for a number of hundred years, as science was ever so carefully allowed to develop on this planet, that science was intended and it was cultivated to take us away from an understanding of God. Why? Because if we understand God in terms of science as well, we begin to remember divine science, which means we begin to remember who we are and the power that we have and the commission that we came here to do, which was to reset the divine blueprint on this planet. Humans were commissioned for this purpose. They were asked by God, they were created by God to serve that purpose. And they were created to do that because they wanted to as well. It wasn't that somebody said you have to go, like set the divine blueprint down there, whether you like it or not. It wasn't one of those. We were actually part of God, as everything else was, and before we came into individuation, we decided there needed help in this particular area of the cosmos. And we decided that we would be the part of God that would incarnate as a race that would assist in healing of this particular system that needed it. We are all composed of Partakai units. Everything is composed of Partakai, Partakai, and Particum. Partakai units in science terms are antimatter units. In Partakai are antimatter units. Partakai are antimatter units, and which would be antiparticle, and Particum are matter units. So you have particle and antiparticle, and then antiparticle, which is a state that when you put particle and antiparticle together, it transmutes and returns back to this. When you put the Ire and the Mane back together, it returns to the oneness, the wholeness, the Manu. So there's this expression of the divine Trinity. We are literally built upon it. All right, science is built upon it. Everything we look at around us is built upon it. All of our templates are built upon it. It is a primal substance that of creation, and that primal substance is living God consciousness. That is energy. That is the energy that becomes electromagnetism. When we talk about particle, particle, and particum, this would be zero charge. It would have no charge, electrically speaking. This particle would have a positive electrical charge, and the particum would have a negative electrical charge. When we talk of forces, electrical and magnetic force, for example, we would have the electrical force, which is associated with the Manet frequency, and the magnetic force, or the drawing in force, which is associated with the Ure frequencies. This is about expansion and contraction. Now, contraction would be called a base magnetic force. That is carried by particum units primarily. If you have expansion is moving outward, energy moving outward. That would be the electrical force. That is the Manet force, and that is primarily the particle carrier. Particle are carriers of that. So you have expansion and contraction and still point and the stillness. So all of these principles, it's hard to describe, and there's a lot of frequency. We could write like 20 books just to try to fill in what I just said, right? To make it make more sense. But the most important thing I would like you to understand is there are 3 eternal God forces that God itself creates and keeps there on purpose every day. So the rest of creation can exist and take place within it. There is nothing outside of God. There is no place or space outside of God. So there is no way to be away from God. But there is a way to forget. And when we forget, that's when we feel that God is somewhere else. And that's when we feel lonesome and frightened and scared inside, because we don't know what we're a part of, what we're connected to. That's what makes us vulnerable to believing fairy tales that are told by people with not too nice intentions, that tell us, keep looking outside, find that God out there. Oh, maybe you'll find him under that rock or in that tree, or maybe you'll find him if you say 500 Hail Marys today. But what they're trying to get you to do is distract yourself. Because if you find God, if you really do, you're going to find it's inside. And if you even start to realize that, you will never ever settle for somebody trying to take that God away from you again. Because the God force is what you're made of. It is alive within you, and you can bring more of it into your awareness and into your body here and into more full expression here. There comes a point where you can walk in the world and, as they say, be in the world but not of it. This is what is meant by that. You can walk anywhere in any world when you fully embody your God force and know it's there. You're not confined by it. That's what it means, not of it. It doesn't mean you don't interact with it. You think you're better than it. You walk around with a snotty attitude and, like, wear white robes and have people kiss your feet and stuff. You don't need to do that. That just shows you don't know too much yet. It means you can walk. You can like go and see stupid movies at the movie theater that are like really dumb or really bad. You can go and have a drink at the bar and have beer with your buddies. That does not mean you are not holy. That does not mean you are not spiritual. Now, if you take it to excess, you're just saying, you're putting a sign on your astral body that says, vacant, rent me, right? You're asking for trouble. That's why moderation is the key. If you were going as far as spiritual etiquette in handling one's body while you're here, especially while you're waking up. Excesses in any form aren't good for you. But abstinence is also a trick. Now, there's a trick in abstaining from anything. What you resist persists. It grows and gets bigger, because by the fact that you've put so much energy into whatever the it is that you think you need to avoid it, you're actually energizing it and you're making the impulse to do it stronger. So you get yourself tied in a knot, in other words. I will, I won't, I will, I won't. Moderation is balance. It's balance of energy. And when we're working with our bodies within this divine cosmic structure, balance is very important. Our system on this planet is very out of balance right now. A lot of it is in this universal structure. Fortunately, we're not the only universe, and there's a lot of balanced universes that can help us. Balance is the perfect expression of particle, particle, and particum. Particle units cycle. It's called particle phasing, where they literally cycle through the particle, replicates itself. I believe it's the replica, the original breaks down. All right, here's how it goes. I have to remember, I haven't taught this part in a while. The particle units Now remember, they're waveforms, right? Spherical waveforms, little tiny ones, but there's the huge ones that everything else exists within. The little tiny expressions or carriers of the Mano, Mene, and Ire force, they go through Partakai phasing, which is a cycling of going from stillness to expansion to contraction and back again. This is a process that creates what are called flash lines, turning on and off of little scalar waves, bringing energy in and bringing energy out of manifestation. Partakai phasing takes place where the Partakai unit actually replicates itself, and then the original one polarizes, breaks down, and it becomes the Ire carrier, the Partakam, and the Mane carrier, the Partakay, at the same time. But it's a syncopated rhythm. There's actually almost like a three-point rhythm, if you're going to like a three-step kind of thing, when you get into time. Now, time is tricky, because time is actually simultaneous. It's all happening at once. And you say, okay, well, you can take it so far while you're in a body here to understand what that means, because all of the structure that we're learning how to work with is time-coded. Well, that came first, and that causes this to happen. Cause and effect imply time. All right? If time is actually all happening at once, it gets a little confusing when you're in time trying to figure out how time isn't real. So it's only real when you're there. Well, we're here. So in terms of time, there is a three-step rhythm to the Partakai, Partakay, and Partakam phasing. What Partakai units do, these little waveforms do, is they collect more of like kind. Partakai units will collect more Partakai, Partakay will collect more Partakay, and Partakam will collect more Partakam. They like attracts like in that regard. They'll actually attract more of the same kind to themselves. Now, this implies that we have the Manu, Mene, and Ire force, the big ones that everything's taken place within, that are like just kind of, imagine big bubbles that everything exists within. This implies, if there's lots of these little guys happening, and there's more that can collect, it implies those first three, the first three, Partakai, Partakay, and Partakam, the Manu, Mene, and Ire, are breaking their consciousness down, sending some of their consciousness into smaller form. They're recreating the creation. Just like Source put a portion of its consciousness in to form the original three, the original Trinity. Well, the original Trinity goes forth and does the same. And what it creates does the same. So there's a perpetual, massive creation that takes place as God individuates itself through this structure, through the structure of divine science and divine spirit. But it doesn't change the fact that it is all God. Even the fallen ones are faces of God. God was aware when the creation took place. This is one of the questions by the time we get to understanding black holes a lot of people ask is, well, God created all of it, and God is all of it, so it's okay. That means God wanted it that way? That means God created this drama on purpose. That means those mean people that are doing horrible things, and we find out some of the horrible things these creatures have done from over there, you can really make you wonder, does that mean that God is evil too? And there is an answer to that one. Now, there's a trick that's happening in the New Age movement, and some philosophies are teaching God's neutral. God doesn't care. God didn't have an original. God had the intention of creation, and there is no negative or positive. There is, therefore, evil and good are equal. So it doesn't matter which one you honor. Now, that's a twist and a lie. The intention, the original creation intention of the cosmic matrix was loving free will expression and co-creation and cooperation between the parts of God who knew it was himself in the first place, itself in the first place. There was the desire to have joy, to experience joy. God does have a preference to joy. You don't get neutral. You know when you get neutral? There's some traditions that teach you to go into a space where you can go into a space where you actually feel no difference between either set of emotions. The shadow body does that. That is the type of reality that the beings in the black hole who don't have an emotional body anymore experience. We've been tricked into thinking that's some kind of state of nirvana where we're supposed to reach for that. There is a state called nirvana, but that's not it. All right? Becoming detached to the point where you feel nothing and feel no difference between either does not mean you're becoming more like God. God feels every flicker of every butterfly wing. God feels every pain or every joy experienced by any one of its pieces. So every time we hurt, God hurts. Every time we bring hurt to something else, God hurts. God would prefer not to, but in the creation, free will was the key. God wanted to create portions of itself in its own image, like itself, which meant they had to be free to choose what they would like to experience. And they could, if they wanted to, and God knew this was implied by the creation itself, they could actually choose to go against the creation structure and the creation order. They could choose to do things that were harmful. But that was something God didn't know would actually happen until the creation is set in motion. When God found parts of itself under certain circumstances behaving in ways that never thought I'd do that. Now, the pieces of beings who have fallen, they are a part of God too, but what they don't remember is how to connect to the feeling of the God presence. They don't know how anymore because they don't have a template that can hold it. They cannot hold D12 frequency. D12 frequency is the point at which we go into what's called unity consciousness, where we begin to really come out of polarity, where we're seeing this versus that, where we begin to experience the blessedness within goodness and within evil, within pain, within sorrow. That doesn't mean we like evil or we like pain. It means that we understand it, and under some circumstances must allow it, just like God allows it. Because if God tried to stop all evil or all expression, it would imply God had to stop free will. And if God stopped free will, God would stop the creation. In order to have joy, it implied free will creation. To have free will creation implied beings, once they were in, God, once he projected himself in here, could decide or get twisted up in the creation framework and begin to create things that were not of the original intention. But if that was not allowed to some degree, neither could take place. However, there is a rebalancing thing that's set right in to the very structure of Partakai, Partakay, and Partakam, and the very structure of the cosmos itself. At a certain point in time, because the intention was perpetual, eternal life creation, implied within the structure that we're going to learn about, the structure of the cosmic structure, which is built on Cathara grids, within that whole structure of divine science energy, there was kind of a trump card. It was created to self-sustain. So if, at any point, anything got so far out of balance, like a group of beings got so twisted and so confused, eventually there would be a rebalancing set. It would be set in energy. It would be the consequence of energy, not some God coming down and judging anybody. But we will live the consequences of our actions. We get shown that in little ways, in a regular life. But if you've done some really horrible things, like take over stargates and start trying to move planets around where they don't belong and trying to harm other races, you are going to teach yourself a very big lesson in energy eventually. That's what's taking place with the black hole people. Anyway, I want to get to the point where I don't want to get stuck on this graph. I can go on forever with one graph and take you on tangents, and I want to do that. I want to get through this. That structure, Partakai, Partakay, and Partakam, they build up to form what were Partakai grids. I shouldn't have changed that quite so fast. Let me do this real quick. You could wait to get rid of it, right? I'm back. Partakai, Partakay, Partakam, they bring more of like kind together as the Manu, Mane, and Ire forces project more of themselves into creation. They make more of little replicas of themselves. These little replicas, which are conscious, they are conscious units. These are people. These are identities. We're built of identities, right? They get together by like attraction, and they create what are called Partakai grids. This is the beginning of the fabric of the unified field, the scalar wave shields that we've talked about. All right? And they continue to pull in more of like kind until they form three-dimensional scalar wave grids. These things here are called chelons. This is where we get chelantic science. Chelons are taking 1, 2, and 3 sets of flash lines, which gives a form three-dimensional potential. So you have Partakai, Partakay, and Partakam. They form interwoven Partakai grids that accrete or bring into themselves more Partakai, Partakay, and Partakam that fill out to form chelons, or crystallizations of light and sound and scalar waves, or scalar waves of light and sound that form crystallized units. These are the building blocks behind all the little tiny particles that science is finding. So this form here, this is called a Kilon code, which is a grouping of these. See, these little guys group to form these get bigger, and then they form these, and these get bigger, and they form clusters. This forms the shield. This is what the shields I'm talking about are built on. These are three-dimensional scalar wave forms, each Kilon code, and they will all have different mathematical relationships. We have what is called a crystal body. Another word for the crystal body is the shield. And that is the holder of our consciousness. Remember, these are conscious. These are units of the consciousness of God that collect to form things out of the units of the consciousness of God. These are identity. We have a crystal body structure that is the truth of our identity. If we took our mask off, now we have lots of different forms that we've experienced, actually. Most of us, if you don't remember incarnations, you'll just remember the one you're in. But we have a lot of different forms, and all of them are united through a crystal body structure that is unique to us, but also holds the template within itself of the literal entire cosmic structure. To come in, let's say you were a pulse of consciousness from God that was going to enter the creation structure, you would project yourself in through each of the levels. It's called stepping down. You would step down. You would go and leave a piece of yourself as the Manu, a piece of yourself as the Ire, a piece of yourself as the Mane. And then you would go down into the smaller currents from there. So you have a piece of yourself that's expressing in scalar wave form all the way down the dimensional chain. The piece you see when you look in the mirror is a composite piece. You actually have, there's 1,728 of you. Every person implies that there's 1,727 more. We'll get into that a little bit more too. This has to do with your shields and your incarnations. So I just want you to understand the core structure, the three primal God forces, which are the Manu, the Mane, and the Ire, how they express as Partakai, Partake, and Particum, how they build up to form Partakai grids, how they fill out or accrete energy, bring it into themselves, and form Kilons, and they accrete more and form Kilon codes, and these are the structures of scalar waves, little tiny composite scalar waves that make up that structure, your template that's called the shield. But it's also the structure of the universal unified field as well. The whole cosmic template is formed of these, and everything that exists has a tinier shield that exists within that cosmic shield. Okay. Yes, yes.
I'm assuming that with the how you have the Kilon codes, that how they're formed with each person is what makes us different.
Yes, yes. She was making a comment about how with the Kilon codes, those little crystallized things, how they're formed gives us our individuation, our individuality. It's what makes us different. They each have different types of mathematical programming, and there's different combinations of mathematical programming that allow for different forms or different shapes or different expressions of individuated identity. Okay? Now, we go into the, we just talked about the cosmic shield, how the fabric of the cosmic unified field, right, is created from those Partakai, Partake, and Particum grids. Now, the crystal body grids. We can look at this easily in terms of, we'll just look at 15 dimensions and primal fields here. This is getting closer to our universe here, all right? This is a diagram that shows one 15-dimensional time matrix. Just one, all right? That would be at the lower end of the stairway to heaven, okay? But if you think of the cosmic shield and smaller shields within it, if we get to the universal level, there is a structure of that shield that forms on a very specific mathematical program. It is structured to form 15 dimensions, 1 through 15. These 3 dimensions actually forms this way. If you're coming in from God, you'd be coming in this way. First, you enter this area. This is called the primal sound field, and it has 3 levels to it. First, the Akkadic, and then the Akkadic births the Polaric and the Triadic. Again, the Trinity, right? From the primal sound fields, then emerge the primal light fields. From the sound comes the light. We have the dimension 15, 14, and 13. Actually, 13 comes first, and it creates 14 and 15. All right, so we have the primal sound fields and primal light fields. This is called, this HU here, HU. The HUs refer to harmonic universe. These are called harmonic universes, and there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 harmonic universes in one 15-dimensional time matrix shield or template. and there is a primal sound field beyond that. Now we're down here in our particular time matrix, where our reality field and everything we see out in space that our spacecrafts are looking at and that kind of stuff, it's all taking place in what's called harmonic universe 1, which is dimension 1, 2, and 3. Dimensions are different from each other. They each have a different, remember I talked about Partakai phasing, the rhythm, that 3-step, where the Partakai becomes Partakay, becomes Particum, and circles back and forth. Well, there are different rhythms. You can do a slow 3-step, or you can do a fast 3-step. Right? Each dimension has a different rhythm of Partakai phasing, which makes it distinct from another dimension. So you have each harmonic universe, which is a set of 3 dimensions, is composed of 3 different sets of Partakai phasing or flash line sequences. So each dimension also, if they were created this way, they started at the top and worked down. We got primal light fields. Next was created what's called the pre-matter template. This dimension 12, that it has the coding for all of the dimensions down from 12, is called your Christos shield. All right, the universal Christos shield in terms of the universe, but you have one too. You have a part of you that's connected to it. All right, it's also called your Maharic shield. D12 is the beginning. Now, when we're up in here in the primal light fields, these are antimatter, all right, which would be gaseous light. That is the form that matter takes there. It's not quite matter yet. It would be, it's actually called thermoplasm. It's hot gaseous light. That's consciousness expressing as hot gaseous light. You each have a piece of yourself that wears that body form, hot gaseous light. When we move down, this is called density 5. These are also harmonic universe. The word could be substituted for density level. All right? This is the least dense level in manifestation. When you start, first you have sound, where you don't even have any manifestation. Sound becomes the light, which means it becomes thermoplasm first. Then that works down and becomes, the next thing is pre-matter. Dimensions 10, 11, and 12, starting with 12, so that's like 12, 11, and 10, form what's called the pre-matter Christos template. That is hydroplasmic liquid light. That's actually where the gaseous light begins to cool, which means the flash lines begin to slow down a little bit. And it begins to cool, and it becomes pre-matter. And it looks like pale silver liquid light. And that's one of the currents, the colors that we use to direct that particular frequency when we're doing visualizations. That's the pre-matter template. Now, these are the frequencies when we're restoring our own Christos divine blueprint. The D12 level is what holds your divine blueprint, which is the blueprint for everything in manifestation. So from here down, from the pre-matter template, this is where you're getting into space, time, and matter systems fully manifest, where you have 3-dimensional holograms with separate bodies and things to walk around in. Because before you get down here, up here, you're still made of liquid light. This is the universal Christos, and each of us have a portion of ourselves that are expressing as hydroplasm, pre-matter, liquid light. It is conscious. It is a piece of ourself that is us, that we forgot we had. That is the state that is known as your avatar consciousness. Yes?
So, as an example, if you take D1, 3 through 15, is that where we could say our sun, the being of our sun exists up there, but it manifests down in the D1 through D3 level? So you're connected there, and then there's a line horizontal.
Right.
That's in the present time matter.
I think I'll address that in a little bit different way that will probably, I think, answer the question. You were saying that our sun is a... Okay. Well, I'm sorry. Yeah. Basically, the question that you were asking was...
You use our sun as an example.
Our sun.
Representing this. The being of the sun exists in the D1, 3 through D1, 5, but manifesting down in the D1, 2 through 3 level.
Right. I think the answer is somewhere in what I'll say next. I'm not sure, but I'm hoping it is. Each level here, each of these harmonic universes or density levels, every being has a manifestation. Well, not always down here, but our sun, for example, that we see down here, that you were using as an example, has its expression in density 2, in density 3, in density 4, and in density 5. Now, there's a trick to perception that's really interesting. Because when we look at things right now that appear as suns or, hot glowing stars and things like that, that would change. Some of those are actually planets, but you need to have a different frequency to be able to see them in that stage. So there's a lot, I think, to the greater questions that were in that question. But the one thing I can at least answer on that question right now is the fact that, yes, our sun, as it's manifesting down here, it also does have its equivalent counterparts up there. Now what's interesting is, so do we. What these levels represent, here we're coming down from sound vibration. We have a part of ourselves here too, as sound vibration. And that's called our Janus consciousness level, or our Ascended Master consciousness level. We always have it. It's there. We come into the primal light fields of D13, 14, and 15. That's called our Rishik level of consciousness, or our Rishi level of identity. Coming down into the pre-matter, liquid light, this is our Christos, or Kristalla, if you identify with female. The Christos frequencies are in here. That is our Christos divine blueprint level of self. We come down here, and we get into dimensions 7, 8, and 9. That's the next density coming down. We actually count the densities this way going up. This would be density 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But they're actually created coming down. And when you're coming into them, you come in this way. Now, dimensions 7, 8, and 9 form what's called density 3. 1, 2, 3. Density 3 is the next stage down. It's like the cooling of consciousness. Consciousness cools, and first it becomes vibration, then it heats up here, becomes light, and that light cools and becomes pre-matter, liquid light. That cools to become something called etheric matter, which is ghost-like. It would look, how we perceive the image of ghosts, right? That kind of thin, not quite solid look. That's etheric matter density. That is the density characteristic, the matter density level characteristic of density 3. So you go from pre-matter, liquid light into this kind of, it's made of particles and things now. It's taking on matter form. It's more solid than the liquid light, but it's still not fully solid. Like you can bang against it. You can walk through it, that kind. It goes from density 3 pre-matter, density 3 etheric matter to what's called semi-etheric matter, which is density 2. That's composed of dimensions 4, 5, and 6. All right, density 2 is semi-etheric matter. It's a bit less than this, less dense than this, but not too much. You have physical worlds in these systems where you would experience physical worlds in densities 1, 2, and 3, but they would have different properties to them. Now, we're in the process, we're still in what's called gross matter density, and that's a very appropriate word. It's not, its implication of gross, yucky, that's not why it's called that, but it applies as well, I think. Yeah, at least on this planet. So we're in dimensions 1, 2, and 3, gross physical matter density, gross matter density. These are all physical, though, like densities 1, 2, and 3. There are physical expressions of body forms and of reality fields. So it's not that you get out of here and then you go hyperspace and turn into just pure consciousness. To turn into pure consciousness, you have to expand yourself all the way through and literally expand back out. Because what you're doing to come in to manifestation is you're contracting yourself first down into vibration, then expanding out as light, then contracting yourself back down into smaller and smaller packages of expression. And you're leaving a part of yourself along the way, on each part of the journey. When you come in, you create first your Ascended Master Self, which is a part of your consciousness that always hangs out in the primal sound fields and it's with you all the time. Now these are your direct connections to God, the parts of you that have never left connection with God at all. Okay, you have your Ascended Master Self here, you have your Rishi Self here, you have your Christos or Avatar Self here. Here you have your Oversoul. Here you have your soul. And here you have what is called the Taran, which is you, the incarnate self, the self that knows itself incarnate down here. This is the structure of your identity, not just the structure of the cosmic 15 or the universal shield, but it is also the structure of the universal shield. Earth, for example, is a manifestation down here. It implies it has a soul, an oversoul, an avatar, a rishi, and a sound expression beyond that, an ascendant master. Even planets, any matter form, has its expression. If you see it here, it has some expression in through these fields, particularly if it's a Christos creation, which means it was originally part of the divine blueprint, the D12 divine blueprint, pre-matter blueprint for a particular time matrix. Now, for example, with our Earth, we have Earth in density 1. Its counterpart, its soul body, is in density 2. It's called Tara. In density 3, its etheric body, its oversoul body, is called Gaia. In density 4, the pre-matter liquid light template for it is called Aramitena. Now, Aramitena, when we look up in the sky and look at the science charts that our astronomers have put together, there's a system called the Lyra system, and there's a star that's called the Double-Double in Lyra. That particular system, the Double-Double, is the actual place where Aramitena exists. So the Double-Double, we call it Aramitena. That particular star holds the whole pre-matter template for this whole 12 dimensions of this 15-dimensional matrix. So there is, the shields themselves, if you can think of stars and planets as big shields, all right? We have smaller shields that our bodies are built on. Planets have bigger ones, stars have bigger ones. Some stars have bigger ones than others. Some stars are central suns. We also have here, this is in the center, and this is interesting, because this is actually considered the galactic core in a universal structure, or the universal core. You have this would apply to galaxies too. These structures, like you can take them down to the microcosm as well as up to the macrocosm. But here, dimensions 7, 8, and 9 hold something called the monadic core. At D8 is the monad. Now, this has to do with expansion and contraction of consciousness as it comes in and goes out of a matrix. There's actually a connection here that connects directly into what's called the parallel time matrix. So every 15-dimensional time matrix implies it has a parallel time matrix. One would be the expression of the particum. One would be the expression of the particule. One would be a base man-A or base electrical. One would be a base Ire or base magnetic. One would be the male. One would be the female, which of course implies there's one that would have both. There would be one universe. If you have this one, you have a parallel one of these. That would imply, because they're in polarity, that they originally came out of one that wasn't polarized, which would be the expression of the Manu. This is where we get into, as we go along into the Eka maps, you'll see where the Eka universes exist. They are the expressions of the Manu, where polarity, there's still enough polarity to have manifestation, but it's not as extreme as it is within dimensionalized 15-dimensional time matrices. So one should basically understand this structure. The 5 harmonic universes, the pieces of each of us that live in those 5 harmonic universes. Dimensions, one other thing I'll say about dimensions so we understand them, because it becomes important when we talk about base 12 and base 8 systems like we will tomorrow. Every dimension has a set of 12 sub-frequency bands in the natural divine blueprint. When you're dealing with that black hole system we were talking about, they've actually mutated the shield for their universal structure, and they've cut out of every dimension, they've cut out 4 of the frequencies. And that means they can't run the frequencies that correspond to them. In the fallen matrix, they have 1 through 8, but they do not have sub-frequency bands 9, 10, 11, and 12. What that means is they cannot run frequencies 9, 10, 11, and 12 into the lower dimensional bands. Now they are beginning to work with a system. They are trying to create a full base 11 reverse system. This is part of what they're doing with why they're trying to mess with our system over here. But right now they're running on base 8. So we are base 12, which means each of our dimensions has 12 sub-frequency bands in it, which means each carries a piece of the higher dimensions. Now, dimension 12 holds within its mathematical pattern everything below it plus its own mathematical pattern. So the D12 pre-matter template can be used to reset anything that goes wrong in these lower frequencies here, because it holds the full mathematical pattern for dimensions 1 through 12. Dimension 11 holds the frequencies for 11 through 1. Each dimension holds, like 10 would hold 9 through 1. 9 would hold 8 itself plus 8 through 1. When you take it up to 12, D12 has an interesting capacity. This is the place where we begin to connect with the frequencies of D11 in the parallel. So you actually begin here to make the link that will allow the particle and antiparticle to come together, the particum and the particule to come together. Begins the process of being able to go through the seals that are actually in dimension 8. But the D12 divine blueprint is actually directly connected to the same thing in the parallel matrix. So when we run this, the frequency of D12 light polarized would be white. When it's run as a full D12 current. It links in with the parallel, and it picks up the silver that would be the 11, so it becomes pale silver. When you mix the full D12 current, when you have full D12, which means a non-polarized current, where you're picking up the currents from the parallel as well as from here, you have the ability to fully reset any of the frequencies down here. And you have the ability to open what are called seals that hold these other higher frequencies, the primal light field and sound field frequencies. Right now they're being held out of your body, out of the field, out of the planet, that kind of thing. Once you are running D12 frequency, or a planet's running D12 frequency, it then has the ability to begin bringing in the even higher frequency connections to God, which is more consciousness as well. If we can think of energy as not just energy, it is that, it is frequency, but it is also living consciousness, the parts of ourselves that we left behind, the parts of ourselves that are always at one with God. All right. If we can think of, as we move along through these structures, if we can remember that while we're doing science, it will help a lot. If we can just remember that the spirit is in the science itself. The science is the way the spirit organizes itself when it is creating manifestation. So that 15-dimensional time matrix, what's the next one I have there? I'm going to try to go through these quick, as a lot of people have seen these. Just want to show this real quick. These also, same diagram, right? But it shows something else. It shows that these are also cycles of time. All right? This is called a time matrix because it's within that 15-dimensional structure that the experience of time can take place. That's where you have different sets of Partakai phasing rhythms that make different dimensions, that give different rhythms to consciousness, where consciousness begins to follow spirals of evolution. See, evolution and creationism all go together. There is a God who created evolution. And evolution is upward and downward. You come in, and then you evolve back out, and then you can come back in again. It's the process of incarnating has to do with coming into the 15-dimensional system, going, literally turning yourself into those different states of matter that we talked about. And each of those states of matter will give you a different time cycle, which is a different pulsation rhythm for that three-dimensional system, which means the consciousness will experience some type of time progression, linear time progression, as it breaks itself down into a three-dimensional structure. In order to get into the time matrix, we have to take on the shield configuration of the time matrix. So literally, our shields hold the entire programming of the cosmic matrix within them. We are microcosmic expressions of the cosmos. So I just wanted to see that these are time cycles. These are the larger time cycles, and within each little one, can we lift this up, Lon, please? Thank you. Within each one of these, which is a harmonic universe time cycle, there are little time continua cycles. So if you have that circle there, there's 6 time continua in one of these. This is called a Yuego cycle. Now, it's a little different than the Sanskrit word that they call them the yugas, I believe, the yuga cycles. That was based on, once upon a time in Sanskrit, there were translations of this material, but a lot that has been primarily taken out, and the numerical calculation systems have been changed. But they're called Yuego time cycles. This understanding that our shields, and the planetary shield, the galactic shield, the universal shield, is programmed with certain pulsation rhythms that are built on mathematical programming that allow consciousness or energy to move in certain cycles. This becomes important because this is where we start to understand opening and closing of stargates. All right, opening and closing of stargates has to do with, at certain times in a planet shield or in the galactic shield or a solar shield, there are certain points of vibration that when they are hit, they create the opening to allow more frequencies to come into the shield. This is why we were designed, our universe was designed, and our cosmos and ourselves were designed to be perpetual life beings. If our shields would work properly, if our shields were working properly, our bodies would work properly, every so often there would be an infusion of natural primal life force currents from source. God would send more energy in. And that energy would help us to activate more of our shields, and we would expand. It's called accretion. Growth happens by accretion, which means pulling frequency in from the unified field around you, which is the template around you, pulling it into your template, which expands your template. This is what growth is. Now, when we are dealing with time, I'm not going to get into time mechanics here because it's really confusing. I mean, we've been getting some new stuff on time mechanics that it's just, it's not worth even trying to because I'll get tongue-tied. But there's more coming on time mechanics as far as how it works. It has to do with manifestation as well. I would rather take us through the manifestation stuff than before we get into the time, time things. But it's like that's not a subject that isn't on the CDD plates. That's not a subject that we won't know anything about. There's more on how time actually works. There's something we carry called genetic time codes. And these literally regulate everything. They regulate our growth. They regulate how much frequency, how much Kundalini energy can run through the body. Our genetic time codes are being messed up by the implants that are in the planetary grids right now. And that's why we've been stuck in this state of non-evolution for quite a long time. So I think we can go on to the next one. I won't do time. Yeah, I'm going to try. I've got to speed this up a little to ever get where I want to get to with this. All right, again, same structure, 15-dimensional time matrix. And remember, there's other stuff beyond this, all right? This is just our local 15-dimensional time matrix. These are the primal life force currents that come down. See how they're smaller down here? And then they get bigger. They're bigger, stronger currents, and they're bigger, stronger currents, and really big, strong currents, right? Now, these, you have your density 1, density 2, and density 3 currents, which are dimension 1 through 9 currents. They are called the universal Kundalini currents. So when you hear the word Kundalini, like some systems teach about Kundalini energies, they're talking about these, but they don't usually tell you that because they don't know the context that they fit into. They just know they're life force currents. Now, most of the systems that are dealing with Kundalini are only dealing with these. They don't even know that these exist, and they don't have the technology to open what are called seals that are between these sets of 3 dimensions. Between each harmonic universe, there is what's called a magnetic repulsion zone. It's like a tissue capsule bubble, actually. It's also called the radial body. It separates this reality field from the next one, from the next one. If you could look at this, like this would be the small, a small bubble here. Then there'd be another bubble. This would be density 2 around it. Then another bubble around that. They're like bubbles within bubbles within bubbles. So this little dark band that you see between each set of 3 dimensions it's indicative of, or it's illustrating the fact that there is a magnetic repulsion zone or a void space that exists between each of those harmonics of matter density. Now, each of these harmonics of matter density has a current associated with it. When we were teaching the Kathara Healing Program, we teach you about what are called the triadic phase currents. And they are literally the currents, the specifically named currents of each of these each dimensional current, actually. They're the names of each dimensional current. Another word for the primal life force currents, particularly the ones that are from the primal light fields, which is dimension 13, 14, and 15 down, are called the rays, the 15 rays of creation. Now, all of these 15 rays of creation come out of, first, originally, were expressed, and they are expressions of the Manu, the Mane, and the Ire force, the original Trinity, that is the eternal Trinity. So they are literally the currents of consciousness, pulses of consciousness that move into and out of manifestation, that keep us alive. They are the literal frequencies that come from God all of the time that keep us alive. Part of the reason why humans die right now, and humans were not designed to die, that wasn't a natural imprint for, it was not part of our original divine blueprint. We die right now because we can't bring in enough of those currents to keep and fuel the body, so the body begins to deteriorate and break down because there's not enough frequency running through the template. And part of the template is actually crushed. We die from what's called molecular compaction. Molecular compaction occurs when the template beneath the matter form progressively breaks down and crushes. And that's literally what is the cause of all disease. People get different diseases from different areas. Interestingly, it's even the cause of accidents. We think of diseases as something, okay, I can see how I could get sick from my template being messed up. But an accident happened, something hit you. That's something outside of yourself did that. Accidents, any event, anything manifest that you can see out here, you have a program for it in your shield somewhere. So accidents aren't accidents. There's something in your shield, which means there's something in your DNA that literally drew you and that event together. So There is nothing that we don't have the ability to influence when we begin to understand that we are manufacturing this holographic experience. If we begin to understand we are manufacturing this, and you take a look at that on a mass level, think about the thought forms everybody throws around on this planet. Then you look at how the heck did we get ourselves into this black hole mess, right? We've been thinking some weird things for a very long time. That's how we got into this black hole mess. All right, the question of, all right, if I create my reality, doesn't that mean I can like discreate it? I don't want this to be here anymore, let's make it go away, like the black hole thing. You know, it's a little more complicated than that. If you don't know how you manifested something, you're not going to be able to figure out how to de-manifest it either. Now, most of the time, on a personal level, we're manifesting things. We are constantly manifesting our hologram. Every time we breathe, we're manifesting our hologram. We'll talk about that a little later, how the in-breath and the out-breath and the pause breath are actually the means by which the primal life force currents move down through us and project outward into our own personal radial body. Remember I said that there's like this little radial body skin that's surrounding each harmonic universe? Well, there's also one surrounding each density level of ourselves. One between us and our soul body, between our soul body and our oversoul body. Our radial body is actually like it's as if we're standing in a sphere and we are projecting out through our DNA template. Our consciousness is in the form of primal life force currents, is moving through our template, and it is literally projecting out a movie all around us. But it's a real virtual reality movie. It's got sound, it's got smell, it's got taste. If you get hit by a car, it hurts. You know? I mean, we are the manufacturers. We are expressing as God, but we're not doing it consciously anymore because we have part of our template turned off, that turned our memory off, so we don't know how we're doing it. Right now, when we try to manifest something, sometimes we'll get what we want, about a third of the time. And 2/3 of the time, we'll probably get something we didn't want at all, and often the opposite of what we wanted, because we have a shadow body. And the shadow body is actually running 2/3 of our energy instead of us. So when we try to make things happen, we're fighting ourselves inside and we don't even know it. As we begin to understand structure, cosmic structure, we'll begin to understand where that fits in a little while, where that fits in with your body itself. That's where you will find out where the anatomy of the shadow is, because it has an anatomy. Just like you have a tangible structure of your soul and your oversoul and your avatar and all those parts of you that have scalar wave expression that are with you all the time and in you all the time, you also have a shadow body that since 25,500 BC, everything on this planet has had. And it is not a natural configuration. So as we're learning these things about structure, it will help us to understand, to bring it home. Once we're going out in the universe now, understanding the basic cosmic structure, the primal life force currents, and all these things. We're going to understand the echo maps pretty soon, because I want you to see those. Then we're going to bring it all home into the body, so we understand how our bodies fit into that whole structure. And then we are going to, by probably this afternoon, after lunchtime, and this evening, we are going to work with the flame body healing technologies, which is the exciting part of this whole workshop, because this is the stuff you need most. All right, let's get to the next one, please. Now, many of you have already seen this 100 billion times before, but I'll go over it quick for the people who aren't, the people who are new. This is called a Kathara grid. Kathara means light, sound, one. All right, that's what those sound tones mean. And you put it together, it says Kathara. Originally, before the whole race line got hijacked, the Cathari of France were teaching the remnants of Kathara teachings that had been left by Jeshua and his crew in the biblical times. Now, what this is, it's also been known as the Tree of Life in some traditions. Now, in most traditions, you will not see it with 12 spheres on it. That's because they're not working with divine blueprint. Usually you'll see it with this one missing, which is the monadic one, and this one missing. That's a very frequent way. Where you see it, there'll be 10 spheres instead of 12. Some of them work with 11. That would be these, but not 12. The ones that are not, when you see belief systems that are using this, calling it a tree of life or whatever they want to call it, and they have less than 12 spheres, it is a black hole teaching system. Or a teaching system that started out good and has been corrupted by the black hole teaching systems. All right? And that's usually the case. Usually they didn't have very good teaching systems of their own. They hijacked ours. And they take our teachings, take our books. Heck, they used to raid our temples and take our temples and use our name and teach garbage under the name of God, basically. But this is a Kathara grid. This is really the map of shields, of all shields. It is the first 12 points of vibration, of expression in any shield. Now we have the Trinity, the first forces that are created, the Mana Ire and the Manu. Now these forces form what is called a Kathara grid. They break into a set of 12 vibrations. In terms of dimensionality, there are actually two Kathara grids, as we'll see in a minute. Two interwoven Kathara grids form the primal light and sound. One forms the primal light and sound fields, and one forms the dimensional fields. This particular Kathara grid, with 1 through 12 on it, that is showing you 12 dimensions. This holds the 12-dimensional program. That means every one of these centers corresponds to one dimension. The flash line sequence that belongs to that dimension, its mathematical program is held in that one vibrational point. These are called Kathara centers. We don't call them Sephiroth, we call them Kathara centers. Every template has one of these. The cosmic, actually two of them, one for the primal light and sound fields up above and one for D12 and down. Let me see, all right, wait, hold on, incoming. All right, yeah. Anyway, sorry. I used to get really nervous when they do that. Once in a while, Ma'a's with me all the time. He's one of the Iani speakers. He just kind of like hangs out over my shoulder and taps me on the head once in a while and says something. So I used to feel funny about doing that. Pardon me. I do talk to people that nobody else sees at the moment. You see them sometimes, though. Anyway. The Kathara grid template, there's a lot more on this in the Kathara Biospiritual Healing System manual for people who want to explore it. There's a lot more detail than what I can give you verbally here on these structures if you want more of the science on them. But what a Kathara grid is the first 12 points of vibration in the formation of any template, from the cosmic level all the way down to the personal level. That means everything has a Kathara grid. The Kathara grid holds the mathematical program. The first 12, the first one, I don't have it on this diagram, but there's another one that looks like this that would hold another 12 points that represent the primal sound fields, and then dimension 13, 14, and 15 are the primal light fields. That would be connected to this one right there. So the primal light field D13 would actually be connected at the same point as D12, and that would be a Kathara grid that would go up this way. Now, this is the one for 12 dimensions. It holds the mathematical program for each of those areas of the shield. So the Kathara grid that would be on top here for the primal, called the primal Kathara grid, would hold the mathematical programs of, the energy that the Partakai move on for the primal sound and primal light fields. This one holds the mathematical programs for 12 dimensions. Kathara Center 12 holds all of the programs and all the other ones, and its own. Kathara Center 11 holds its own, plus everything below it, etc. So each one of these centers represents one dimension, one full dimensional program on the cosmic and universal level. So we have an embodied one of these too that we'll learn about later, and that literally, these are, on the personal Kathara grid, it's the personal part of the shield that are the first anchoring points that your consciousness takes on in order to anchor itself into a manifest form. All right, we can go from Kathara, please. Now we're going to take Kathara grids in a little different direction right now. First I'm going to show how it fits into the 15-dimensional matrix, right? No, this is just one 15-dimensional time matrix again. All right, we have the Kathara grid. This is the universal Kathara grid for 12 dimensions. It takes you up to the universal pre-matter Christos template. Here would be where the light and sound, the primal Kathara grid is. You have dimensions 13, 14, and 15. You can ignore those numbers there. There's an easier way to number that. You can have 13, 14, and 15. And then these three, 1, 2, 3, that would be the triadic level of the primal sound fields. 1, 2, 3 levels of the polaric level, and 1, 2, 3 the acadic level. So each of the primal sound fields, there are 3 levels to each level. All right, that's where you get the 12 going, 12 Kathara centers on the primal Kathara grid. These centers are the centers in the body through which the primal currents, like dimension 1 current, would run into the shield through the dimension 1 Kathara center. All right, these are actually the feeding centers that even in your own body, your own Kathara grid that's in your body, in your shield receives the primal life force currents first through the Kathara grid. The currents that go with each dimension come into the shield through the Kathara center point that has the corresponding number. Okay. Now, there's going to be something interesting If you see how this is stacked up here, you have here is the 12 dimensions of our 15-dimensional time matrix. Here's dimension 13, 14, and 15 primal sound fields. What's interesting is when we begin to understand a little bit about these and on the universal level, we'll also understand that these little points of vibration where energy can come in and out in our bodies, into our shields, are also on the universal level, on the planetary level, on the galactic level, stargates, where energy can come in and out. All right? So these 12, when you take it into the universal level, you're talking about one universal time matrix, 15-dimensional time matrix. These also represent the map of the stargates. Each one of those would represent a location in the universal shield. And we do have the maps where we've been given the names of where they are and the ones on the planet as well. So the Cathara grid is the core template that the shield manifests on. It's the first 12 vibrational points, first 12 doorways or windows or gates of energy that move in and out of the template. On the body level, there's things that build up from there, and on the planetary level, we have all sorts of systems that take the energy from there into the next level. We have Merkaba fields, we have axiotonal lines, we have chakras, and all sorts of things. But the energy first comes in through the Cathara grid into the body, into the shield, and then it goes through the cosmic level as well. The stargates are the natural structure by which God and Source and the Manu, Mana, and Ire continually send current or parts of themselves in to feed as energy, to give energy to the perpetual life system and circulate other parts out. This is the circulation system of the cosmic matrix. And we have everything in existence takes on this form in order to get into manifestation. So at the core of every template, and its original template, it took on the whole pattern of vibration and of scalar waves that were built on the Cathara grid. Okay, so everything has to take on this pattern. Everybody's core template is built on this. The cosmic template is built on that. The universal is built on that. When we look at it in terms of stargates, it gets interesting because we learn that, all right, we're down here. That means we can get into the other spaces, right? We could get out of our density and like into the next density by getting through these stargates into 4, 5, and 6, dimension 4, 5, and 6 stargate. We could go to 7, 8, and 9 through these set of stargates. What's interesting, too, is how they connect. And this is what we're going to get into, I believe, next. Is that where I went with that? I think it is, isn't it? It's close. Let me see. Wait. All right. Yeah, we can pull it up a little bit here. Now, I want to explain one more thing on this. Here's what we were just looking at, but in small form. All right, the big graph that was up there a minute ago, where it has the 2 Cathara grids. These are the stargates, right? Here, over here, it lists the locations, the main locations of these stargates when we look up in the sky. And up here, I would like to show this one first, honey. I want to show you the connection between, all right, you have one Cathara grid and the primal Cathara grid, the dimensional Cathara grid and the primal Cathara grid. Here's where shields come in. All right, each 3-dimensional set, remember that would be a harmonic universe, has a shield. If you were really going to draw this, it would look like a big bullseye with this one, this little small one, then another one, bigger one around it, a bigger one around it, until you got all the way out to this one around the outside. But if we begin to understand how Cathara grids and shields go together, a shield is a full mathematically arranged scalar wave template. Now, our whole Maharic shield would be our D12 level shield, which would include all of the mathematical programmings of all of these. The shields, each shield is built on a set of 3-dimensional programs, the core Cathara grid programs for that density level. So this shield here, which is called the telluric shield, corresponds to density 1, and that means in your body, but also on the planet and also in the galaxy, etc. Sorry. Okay. These little things in here that are called signets, which is another word for the stargates, they're really the doorways the energy moves back and forth through. They're the core of the shields, and the center ones, all the way up in each shield, the center ones correspond with the middle pillar. These actually control and direct what the other 2 will do. So this middle pillar, even though it's not the first in creation, it's not the most powerful current. This is the pillar that runs the primary forces of the Mane energy. It actually directs the function of the others the other two pillars, unless you override with these higher systems, what frequencies, which is what we're going to learn to do with flame body activation. All right. So if you look at the Cathar grid too, another way to understand it in terms of the Mane, Manu, and Ire, this is the primary current of Mane, this is the primary current of Ire, and this is the primary current of Manu, coming down this side. This one is actually the first one that was formed. And if this had been the first one that was formed, it would have been a static universe, and it would not have been, there would not be the experience or experiential quality we call movement. But anyway, these shields, we have four that connect with the four densities, right? Density 1, density 2, density 3, density 4. 4 shields. Each shield has its dimensional number that's at its core. It corresponds with the Cathara center. And up here, we have what are called the 4 primal ionic shields. They call these the ionic shields. The word ionic comes from the word iani. The word iani is the name of a race, but it also is a word that comes from the word Janus. The word Janus is a word that means the ascended master level, except they don't use that because it's kind of like, you know, oh, hi, I'm an ascended master kind of stuff. There's too many people pulling that gig, you know, and it's not. It's the real level of what the fakes are trying to say they have. So the word Iani is at the core of the word Ionic, and the word Janus is at the core of that. And the word Janus really means of the unici, which is the point of all union. All right, so these are the ancient words that went with, you know, with the ancient teachings. Okay, we have the Akkadic shield, the Polaric shield, the Triadic shield, and the Rishaic shield. All right, now when we think of shields, remember how we were turning on different parts of our shield to get our DNA to work again, to bring those frequencies and those levels of consciousness back in our bodies? Well, this is what we are turning on. We are turning on the primal life force currents because we're opening the doorways in the shields that allow for those frequencies from all over here to come through these gates and activate the shield and come back into our bodies. Now, we all have these core templates. The shield itself, if you looked at it, would look like a beautiful disc of standing points of light and sound that made pictures. They're all geometrical shapes, and you know they literally look like mandalas. I don't know if anybody, you know, if you're familiar with the word mandala, but they're like a form of artwork that uses symbolism, and they're usually done in a circle, where all sorts of just beautiful self-expression of the self is like put into it, and everybody'd have a different mandala, where your shields are your true mandalas, because everybody will have these primary programs running just to get in here. Even like plants have these, animals have these. Then there would be species differentiations, where you would have, you know, different mathematical programs that would make a rabbit as opposed to a human, or a plant as opposed to an animal. Then you would have, even within that, more differentiation of mathematical geometrical programming that would, even though it's all built on the core template, it would give more differentiation where we get our individuation of form and identity, the self that we call self. And this happens all the way down. So we, like our soul self, we're not all the same soul. We have individuation on our soul level just as we do here. Same with the oversoul, same with the avatar, same with the rishi level. Even our ascendant masters level have different distinct identities. So we don't lose our identity as we expand into becoming at one with God. The whole process isn't about climbing the ladder so much. It's about expanding back to hold the rest of yourself. It's like you have to come into this little body and then grow it out so it can hold the rest of you to get yourself all in. And once you do, and you can hold even this much consciousness in your body, 12 dimensions of consciousness, you are in what is called Christ consciousness. Anything below that is not Christ consciousness, because it is not holding the full consciousness of the Christos. So, Christ consciousness that everybody in the New Age movement likes to aim for, but they don't know what it is, that's what it is. It's being able to hold the consciousness of 12 dimensions of the primal, literally your pre-matter template consciousness, your avatar level identity in body. There's also the higher levels that embody, that go with the primal light and sound fields. And that's what we're beginning the process of doing. When we were first given these teachings, we were being given the Maharada level teachings, which meant the D12 level teachings, how to get this stuff open and activated, how to get your avatar in body. At this point, we are being given the teachings that are how to get the rest of you in body, how to get as much of yourself down here as possible, as quickly as possible, because the planet needs us and we need ourselves because of the things that are going to be happening in the mass drama. But it's all very easy when we start to see how pieces fit together, it isn't that difficult. We'll go into, later this afternoon, we'll do a quick run through on the biology, and it will be quick because once you understand this stuff, the biology plugs in very easily. But these also correspond to the programs in the DNA strand, so we'll talk about that too. But now I want to show you something. Sorry. We go back on the universal level with these. So this would be our 12 dimensions of universal shield, right? This would be the primal light and sound fields of our universal shield. Remember, that's just our universe. We make a distinction between the word cosmic and universal. Cosmic is the big thing that contains many universes, and universes contain many harmonic universes, which are smaller, and they contain many galaxies. Okay, so that's, there's a breakdown in how we use those terminologies there. Can we pull it up a little bit, honey, please? Over here, we are looking at the Cathara grid, the 12-dimensional one for now, as the Stargate map. And here it has the names of where the primary gates are. And if I can read them without my glasses. Here we have Stargate 1. That it's actually the Dimension 1 gate. It's built on the Dimension 1 frequencies. It's one of the easiest ones to go. It would be one of the easiest ones to go through as far as a life form. You wouldn't need as much frequency as you would to go through here. Right? Now this connects with a place called Theta Orion. Theta is also called trapezium. It's a cluster, a little cluster of stars, and so like the gate is in, not just at the center of the star. It's probably like in between the cluster of 4 stars. But in Theta Orion, it's in Orion's sword. The next one here is in Epsilon, which is in the Eridanus system. This one, now these are universal stargates, okay? These aren't just little galactic ones or little planetary ones. Over here, Universal Stargate 3, Earth. Universal Stargate 4, our sun, which is called Sol, S-O-L. This is why this planet is always in trouble, because it has the anchoring rods of the 2 pillars that literally, if you mess with these 2, you can literally reverse the whole. If you took, it's like, imagine if that was standing there, you could take it like this and flip it, right? That's literally what is going down with this black hole crew. They are trying to literally get a hold of these 2, do something to these so they can use the whole bottom thing to flip the whole grid, the whole universal shield down into their matrix. They're hungry. They know they have a limited life expectancy of their black hole itself, which means it'll implode on itself, because it will if it can't receive the inflow and outflow of currents, and it can't receive the D12 inflow anymore. It begins to eat itself. It's like a cancer in itself. In fact, our cancers, our diseases that are affiliated with cancer, come from the reversals that we carry in the templates that are connected to the Metatronic coding in the black hole. So anyway, on the Stargate level, Earth, our sun, a place called Alcyone in the Pleiades. When we look up in the sky in our star maps down here, and like human star maps, you'll see, there's Alcyone, it's one of the stars in the Pleiades. That is, when we are looking at Alcyone, we are actually looking at Tara. That is the soul body of Earth. All right. When we go, gate 6 is in Sirius B. All right. This is where a lot of our buddies come from right now. There's also a part of this particular gate that's fallen in our time matrix. Most of these gates and the planets and stars that go with them have had part of their shields pulled into at least what's called the phantom black hole, which was the smaller one that you can get back out of if you get help. All right, they're trying to pull them all in now through there. But Sirius B, Arcturus is gate 7. Gate 8 is, again, back in Orion, but it's called Mintaka. Okay? There is another, now there's a word here that says Gaia. This is just another gate connection, but our planet, our Earth's equivalent, etheric matter density 3 planet, Gaia, is actually the star Polaris. When we look up in the sky, the North Star, that is actually, we are seeing Gaia from density 1, and it looks like a star, but if we were in etheric matter density, it would be a planet we could walk on. It wouldn't be a fireball in the sky. So this is how perception changes as our consciousness changes. As we turn on more of our shields, we're bringing back our ability to change the matter density level of our body. We can move through gates and literally go from being solid matter to less dense matter and back again if we want to. So there's a lot of things that change in our hologram when we begin to bring more of us back into body. To be able to go through gates, we need to activate our base 12 program. we have to be able to at least run the frequencies. If we want to get up here, we have to be able to embody those frequencies, is what it comes down to. We'll talk later about the strands and how they correspond to gates and all of that, the DNA strands, and how they correspond to the shields. Can't talk. There we go. All right, so anyway, we're back up here. 7, 8 is Mintaka Orion, that's in Orion's belt. Meroc Andromeda, Lyra Vega, Lyra Avion, which I believe is in our science charts, they call it Shilak. I don't know how they pronounce it. I think it's Shielak, but its actual name is Avion, and Aramatena, which is Lyra Double Double. These 3 gates here are the prematter gates, right? The dimension 12, 11, and 10 prematter gates, the liquid light gates. They're called the cradle of Lyra, because that's where all things in our time matrix have to come through in order to get into manifestation in the densities. So it is, the cradle of Lyra is all things in this time matrix originated from the Lyran system. So everything is Lyran at its core, because we all hold the programs, literally in our DNA, of the cradle of Lyra, where we came from. Okay? Now, we're going to see how, this is what I wanted to get to, the echomaps of the God World Gates. I'll probably go through those and then we'll do a break, because if we get through these, wait a minute, should I do that before or after? What are we on time? Huh? An hour to lunch? Okay. I'm thinking of taking just a 5. Do you want a 5-minute break for like bathroom runs or something? Okay. Because the echomaps are a little complex, and I don't want to go through another 25 minutes if you need to like run or something. So I could use one too. All right. About 5-10 minutes. There's just a quick bathroom run break. Yeah. I'm not going to launch into those yet. Now we're starting. Thanks, Mac. I'm going to wait till they get back. They're just moseying on in. This reminds me of the bus in Egypt. It took 45 minutes to get everybody back on the bus. I don't know.
You bring litter in the place?
I must have been.
Oh, fancy that. Pounds. Oh, excellent, thank you. I'll come in useful.
Yep. Okay, guys, can everybody come on in and sit down, please? Because it'll be lunchtime before we know it, and I'd like to get you to a certain point before lunch. You know, it was really cool. You know, it was really funny. The girls, remember when the girls from Calgary, they had it worked out perfect. They had a little bell. Ding, 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 ding. Yeah. That was excellent. We should use that idea. Okay, here come the drifters. They're still coming. One more. Okay. Almost all present in the count of 4. Oh, okay. Stargates. Now, we talked about the Cathar grid. Oh, you know what? We're getting into the sequence of graphs that you can follow along with some of it. All the stuff you see up here won't be in your books, but some of it will be, and some of it will be in tiny form, even though it's big up there. You can start with like page 4 in the books that you have, And you can kind of like look, follow along a little bit if you want to look a little bit closer, at some of the detail or something on something you saw go by up there that we were talking about. We already looked at the one on page 4. We had that up there already with the shields and the Cathara grids. And we're going to, in a minute, go into the material on page 5. But before we get to page 5, I'm going to just do a really brief quickie on stargates. What are they? This basically shows what's called the time portal and dimensional lock system, which is the Universal Stargate system. It simply explains that... Where did I put the pointer? I told you I'd lose it. Here it is. Okay. Stargates, there's a distinction between stargates and what are called time portals. Stargates are also time portals, but they have a distinction. They run vertically, up and down the dimensional scale. If you want to go from one density level to another, you need to take a gate, not just a portal. So they run on a vertical axis, where the portals run horizontal and diagonal. All right. Stargates exist at the core of planets and stars, and there are sets of them. This is just showing like one stargate. There are actually sets of 12. Now, if a planet has its divine blueprint intact, there would be a set of 12 that would be operational. Stargates shut down because the stargates are literally points in the shields, right, in the planetary shields. Well, if the shields are damaged, it damages the stargates, which means the planet can't run frequency. It can't bring in the natural proportions and amounts and types of those 15-ray currents that we were talking about, the primal currents. On our planet, there's been damage on this planet for a very long time. There are actually 2 seedings. Is this working, or is this... I thought it was sounding funny. Wait a minute. How's that? Has it come back? It has come back. All righty. Now, on our planet, we'll talk a little bit more about the history tomorrow. I don't want to go into history today because I want to get to the flame body activations today. But we have had 3 seedings of this race on this planet, and twice it was destroyed by our buddies from the black hole matrices because they're trying to get control of the stargates here so they can use it to infiltrate and get control of the whole of 11.5 of the stargates in the universal scale. They're trying to use Earth and the Sun to get control of the rest of the Universal Templar. Now, it's called the Templar. The Stargate setup is called the Templar. We have an inner Templar, which is our Cathara grid and all the energy running systems, and we have a planet has the Templar, a galaxy has a Templar, the universe has a Templar. The word Templar comes from template pillars. Now, the pillars get into something we'll talk about in a little bit when we get into the echomaps of the God World gates. There's something called the 12 Ruche pillars, which are literally the first, let's say, anchoring rod massive scalar wave forms of pre-sound and pre-light that come from source, from the Manu, Mene, and Ire. There are steps to creation, where creation is literally stepped down from the Manu, Mene, and Ire forces, which exist as those spherical, elliptical sphere scalar standing waves. Within that, there are smaller and smaller constructs that get us down to where we are here. All right, I'll get on the Stargates. He said to just shut up and go on the Stargates. So someday you guys may have the privilege of meeting Ma'a. His name is really Ma'ahuate, and he is one of the Iani from Inner Earth, and Inner Earth is in the Inner Eka universal system, not at the core of our planet. But he is one of the primary speakers, or trainers, let's say, that work with the speakers here and work with people here. If we get to the point where we're able to do gate crossings, he would be one of the first ones that we would meet. He's a lovely man. Anyway, Stargates, just so we know the basic structure of them, what they do, if you look at them, if you look at just one of them, they're actually like a little bow tie where you have a vortice of energy this way and a vortice of energy that way, right? One is spiraling energy this way, one is spiraling energy that way. There's a little knot at the center that's called a seal, a crystal seal, and that's actually a location in the shields. All right, we have seals in our bodies that are actually locations in our shields that regulate the opening and closing of these vortices of energy. They regulate whether a frequency can come in or not. On the Stargate level, in planetary shields and galactic shields and universal shields, the seals regulate the opening and closing of the Stargate. When the seal releases by being struck with certain vibration or frequency, these two little cones come together. and they form what's called a Merkaba field. A Merkaba field is two spiraling, counter-rotating energy fields of electromagnetic energy. One's electrical, one's magnetic. And what they form at the center is called a form constant, which is a radial body, magnetic repulsion zone. It's a sphere of energy that forms at the center. Now, all of the radial bodies that we've talked about, how we have that each density is separated by a radial body. Remember when we were doing the 15-dimensional matrix chart? It implies, that spherical form implies that there is a Merkaba field that is generating within itself that form. So this is where the concept of Merkaba comes in. Merkabas are not just something, I mean, I've seen teachings out there that are teaching you Merkabas are just something ascended masters or high important guys from up there in the sky can use to travel around in. They don't explain anything about Merkaba. Merkaba are natural phenomena, Merkaba fields. One would be called a Merkaba spiral. You put them together as the two counter-rotating fields of electromagnetic energy. They're around every form in manifestation. They're called Merkaba fields. To make that Merkaba field a Merkaba vehicle requires activation of certain things and reaching a certain spin speed, because these are spinning. All right, the spirals of energy are spinning. We have one around our bodies and lots of little ones inside of our bodies, and they spin. And the Merkabas and the shields are very connected. We'll get into that when we talk about anatomy a little bit this afternoon. But for now, if we can understand, the stargates actually are planetary and galactic and universal level Merkaba fields that they're kept separate, which means there's no form constant in the middle. That would be a closed stargate. But by running certain frequency into it, that seal would release, allowing that one to move down, that one to move up, forming a Merkaba field, which would form at its center a form constant, which is a doorway. It would be a doorway that you could walk through from this space-time location to another space-time location. And that's just literally how easy it is. I mean, when they open and your body's working the right way, see, if your DNA isn't working the right way, which means your shields are blocked. If your shields are blocked and you try to go through a stargate, if that stargate has a base 12 code and you can't run base 12 frequency, 12 sub-frequency bands in each dimension in your body, it would actually implode your template. It would kill you physically, and it would fragment your consciousness into the unified field. That's why we've been trapped on this planet for so long. I mean, humans have been incarnating here for ages and ages now, and we haven't been able to use the Stargate system at all since about, well, there were exceptions made with a lot of help from our friends on other planets and in other places, but the majority of humans were not able to use gate passage at all since the mutations occurred in the DNA, which began heavily in 25,500 BC. Yes?
So when we die, where do we go before we go back?
I knew that question was going to come. You know what? Hold that question and ask it. Remind me again, when we're talking about the astral body and shadow body, because I will be able to answer it in that context more clearly without going off into that now and losing everybody completely. All right? All right. There's a where do we go and where are we supposed to go? And there's a difference between the two. Because literally for the last, since 25,500 BC, humans have had a very hard time getting out of density 1. Normally you would be able to go into other reality fields. In fact, normally you're not supposed to die in the first place. Your body, you're supposed to be able to take your body with you. But since we've been dying on this planet, particularly since 25,500 BC, we have been being hijacked. This is where we get ghosts from. Ghosts are not a natural phenomena. They're part of the identity of the person that got stuck in the third dimensional band, which is the mental body region of density 1. So they're D3 parts of the personality. It implies there's another part of them stuck somewhere else. These are people and everybody has been falling into this since 25,500 BC. The shadow body has been used, like at the natural time when the spirit would leave the template, actually, the consciousness would leave the body with the template, and it would go up in frequency. It gets split in frequency instead, so half gets stuck here as a ghost, and the other part, actually 1/3 gets stuck here as a ghost, and 2/3 get stuck in the shadow body, which is like an astral body, but it's not the natural astral body. It goes into what's called the phantom matrix black hole system. So The phantom matrix black hole system is not the same thing as the Wiesedeck black hole system. The phantom matrix black hole system is something that it was originally part of our matrix, so it still has our matrix coding. Even though it's reversed, it can be healed. So you can pull back the pieces that have been lost. That's what we need to do with ourselves. 'Cause it's not just dead people that have a part of themselves that are hijacked over into the phantom matrix. We do too, whether we're dead or alive. So we're helping not only dead people when we are working with these shadow body healing techniques, we're helping our living selves as well. But I will get into that more, the death thing and where you're supposed to go, and even their near-death experience I'll probably touch on a little bit too, and what that is when we get into the anatomy a little more. That was a rough around the question. So that's basically the operation of the stargates. Now the portal, that would be a gate, a vertical gate. That would be a diagonal portal. That would be a horizontal portal. That's just showing you how, now these are how the gates would link up, going up the densities. Dimension 1, 2, and 3, density 1, these gates would link into the density 2 gates, bless you, would link into the density 3 gates, into the density 4 gates. And they, of course, link into the primal light and sound field gates. They also have gates. So that's basically the structure. Can we get to the next one, please? I think there's just a bigger version of what oh yeah, here's the fun one. This is the gate location chart, and I do believe you do have one in here. It's not in sequence with what I'm showing here, but you've got this. Is it page 7? Okay. On page 7, you have a tiny version of this in there. Boy, is it tiny. Yeah, this is stuff you need to read with a magnifying glass. Yeah, I was trying to get as much of the data consolidated as possible, for this particular program, because this is being pulled from all of the other programs we've taught over the last 3 years. All right. But anyway, these are the locations, again, of the universal stargates. The main ones are like the big words here. They also have links to other places. All right, like this one links to Gaia, but that's not the main gate. The main gates are these, the bigger ones. Now, here on this one, it also lists the galactic level gates. Remember I said that there's a galactic Cathara grid, one that would apply to, say, our solar system. There's a solar system one, galactic level ones. The galactic grid that connects our solar system into the universal gate system is actually in our solar system. So again, this is why this area has always been historically a hotbed of activity, because we hold major gate chains. Now, universal gate 1 would be the Orion, okay, Theta Orion. But galactic stargate, these GSG words, little letters in front, are the galactic level ones. Number 1 is Mercury. Number 2, Venus. Number 3, again, galactic stargate 3, Earth. So Earth is both galactic stargate 3 and universal stargate 3, which means at the core of this planet, both of those gates are held. So it's a major, gate connection. Now, in our sun is universal stargate 4, but galactic stargate 4 is Mars. Now, universal stargate 5 is Alcyone, the Pleiades, which is Terra. Galactic stargate 5 is now the asteroid belt. It was a planet that was called Maldak, that was destroyed in, I forget the date, it was Seeding 2, during the Seeding 2 history period of the war. There were wars that took place between the Anunnaki races and the Draconian races, the reptiles, and the humans. And this is where our parts of our asteroid belt came from. Not all of our asteroid belt is the remnants of that planet. There's other stuff in the asteroid belt too. The other part of this planet was used, the remaining part after it was blown up, there was a large chunk of it that was used to create something called wormwood. It was taken out of its orbit, and it was used to create the thing we'll talk about tomorrow when we talk about the beast. All right, but the gate is still there. It doesn't function because the planet around it exploded, but it is still a location in the galactic shield, and that location still holds that gate, even though the planetary body around it had been destroyed. Okay, now, universal gate 6 is Sirius B. Jupiter is galactic gate 6. Arcturus is universal 7. Galactic 7 is Saturn. Orion Mintaka is universal 8. Galactic 8 is Uranus. Andromeda is universal 9. Galactic 9 is Neptune. Universal 10 is Lyra Vega. And galactic 10 is Pluto. Now, this gets interesting. We have Lyra Avion is Universal 11. Galactic Stargate 11. It actually held 11 and 12. There was updated information after this. For a while, the planet that's called Nibiru, when it was still in orbit, its orbit was outside of Pluto, but it was the next planet out in our system. Originally, it had started out as the 12th planet in our system. But then there was what had been the 11th planet, which I believe was called Chiron, was destroyed, ripped in half. Part of it's still floating around down by Uranus someplace, and the other half was used for something else. But Nibiru was originally Galactic Stargate 12 position, but when Chiron was destroyed, it actually served the position. There was a linking made, like a kind of an artificial splice that was made, so both gates would still be operational between Nibiru and, between gate 11 and 12 through Nibiru and into the sun, the solar gate. So there's some interesting things that have been done between Nibiru, our sun, and Mars too. There's some strange that wouldn't be naturally part of the Templar, almost like Band-Aids put on at different times when different things were destroyed, but it was important to have the ability to use a gate because a lot of times they would the black hole guys would come in, they'd raid the system, and they would try to close down the gates that the Guardians would use so they could keep Guardian races out so they could continue to take over a system. So a lot of times Guardian races would do whatever repair job as quick as they could and just splice whatever into that they could make work, like running splices between different gates that normally wouldn't be there if a part of a gate was down, just so they could continue to come in here so they could continue to help and try to repair the divine blueprint. Because the whole big mission, literally, for the last 250 billion years in this universal time matrix, in this 15-dimensional time matrix, has been to reset the divine blueprint, which is the D12 pre-matter template for the universe, for this particular universal system. And that humans were created as a part of that team, that Guardian team, that was to assist the other Guardian races in doing this. So anyway, these are the gate connections in our solar system and in the universal system. And here are the corresponding ones on Earth. All right, now here's two things. One's called Stargate Signet sites. Signet is a word that refers to Stargate. And there's something else called Templar Q sites. Now Q sites are interesting. The Q sites are something that were one of those splice jobs that were put into this planet to a place called the Inner Eka system, which part of the Inner Eka universal system is a planet that is the equivalent in the Eka system of Earth. That's the place that's called Inner Earth. All right. These particular locations on our planet hold what's called a Q site, which is an activation site that can be used to activate the corresponding Stargate. Normally, Stargates would be able to run on their own, but the shields on this planet were damaged so badly that there was something called the Halls of Amenti Stargate system was put in, which was a linking system to link our gates into manual control by the Inner Eka systems, where the Guardian races that live there, the Eoni races, who are the Templar masters there, and they're literally the guardians of the temple, like the Templar in this universe and several others, where they would be able to regulate the opening and closing of our gates, which means instead of our gates just shutting down and never being able to receive frequency anymore, because it was that bad on this planet. There was so much damage done to the gates. It was becoming what's called a descending planet, which means that the shields can no longer receive infusions of primal life force currents, so it will use up the energy at its core, and eventually it will implode. A descending planet will eventually implode and go black hole. It will go into black hole status as an energy pattern. And our planet was headed in that direction at various different times. The Halls of Amenti Stargates were created over a long period of time, and this goes back to a history that's actually in Voyager's Volume 2 that explains the fall from Tara, when this solar system itself wasn't originally here. It actually fell through implosion of the Palladian system. And so there's a whole history that goes with this anyway. But these Q sites are important because the gate can't open here without the Q site being activated first. So they've had us actually going around and like dropping security codes to open. There's a whole bunch of security codes, frequencies, specific mathematical frequencies that were put in as security seals on these sites and on these sites in our planetary shields, so that if humans or indigos were wiped out and not on the planet, the gates couldn't open, so they couldn't be used by the fallen races to take over, the rest of the Templar. So we've been asked to go around, and we have been for about 2 or 3 years now, dropping security codes, just running the frequencies through our bodies, and because they're in the human and the indigo DNA, the security seal release codes. They're preparing them to open. They're not fully opened yet, any of them. But you activate the Q site, and that activates allows for the activation of the corresponding gate site, which allows for the running of the corresponding frequency. All right, so D12 frequency has to come through this gate system. They've activated just a tiny bit of this on January 1st of 2000. That's when we were able to get D12 subharmonics back into the, into our planetary Templar, where we could use the D12 Christos frequencies again. So these are the connections. It's interesting when you look at some of them. We got the Q site, and the Q site, okay, is in Iraq. I forgot. I thought it was the other way around. The Q site is in Iraq. When I talked about Iraq yesterday, and I said gate 10 was there, it's Q site 10 that's in Iraq, which is the activation site for the gate that's in Iran. These guys are going to have an interesting time of it. There's several in England, or several important areas in Europe. Two of them are in England. Let's see, where are we? Gate 11. Okay. U.S. Gate 11, which is the one that connects through it would connect through Galactic 11 and into Universal 11, is in the Vale of Pusey, England. This is why we're being guided to move there, because there's some healing work, let's say, on film that needs to be done. So this is the reason for our England move. But we're going to France to do some work in November. We've been basically being guided to different ones of these sites in different order, and the Guardians explain what needs to be done at a site. And this is where, when we do our trips and we have our scheduled trips, we don't go just for fun to have workshops in weird places. We go because we're being asked. Yeah, thank God we haven't had to go to Gate 10 or anything. It's like, oh, please send someone else, not me. But we've gone to Cyprus. We actually lived here for a while in Sarasota, Florida, where Stargate 2 is. We're now moving out of Florida, thank God, because the grids in this area have been completely taken over by what are called the Nephilim, and they're the Wisadek people. So at this point, that's not the greatest place in the world to live, and if you do live there, it's good to wear your flame body all the time. All right. So there's a whole conquest going on that involves these sites and these locations on this planet. It has always been about this. The thing is, now is the time they were waiting for since Atlantis. The whole period of time of our history, from Atlantis, which its records fell, let's say, in 9,558 BC, up to the present time, that whole history has been about getting certain groups located on certain lands because of the grids that were in them, knowing that the DNA interacts through the shields directly with the shields of the planet. So there's been a takeover going on progressively. One group killing another. No, you're not going to have it. We're going to code it to our way. We're going to code it to our way. It was all in preparation for this time period now, because they couldn't do anything with the gates until it entered its natural potential opening cycle, which only happens once every 25,556 years, 26,556 years. And that was due to occur between the year 2000 AD and 2017 AD. So this has been planned for ages, and we're just watching this amazing unfolding of this plan, but most people don't realize there was a plan behind it, and they have no idea how long the history is on it. So that's your gate connection chart. Yes?
1, 2, and 3 that are below them.
Okay, these are Vortis sites, yeah. Okay, with these guys, the Vortis and the gate are in the same place, but for the density 1 ones, the ones that correspond with density 1, the areas on Earth, there would be one primary vortice, which is a chakra. All right, we didn't get into chakras on the body yet, but the planet has chakras that are called vortices, and there would be 12, there's 7 primary vortices that run the frequencies of the gates, but the number 1, 2, and 3 are in different places than the gate itself, where these are in the same area of the gate. So it just has to do with frequency interface, and there's a lot of complicated mechanics and mathematical stuff about Why? Because like when you look at this, you can't put this on the planet and the gates line up according to that. That's the core template of the shield, but it doesn't look like a big Cathara grid from the sky when you look down on Earth. You know what I mean? So there's interfaces, but with these three, these would be in different places. If you took this to Terra in density 2, these three would have vortices in different places, but the others would have them in the same place. So it's just another part of the mechanics that they haven't gone into much as far as that question of why are the vortices there. The vortices actually begin opening a bit before, they open before the gates will. They begin the process of bringing the subharmonics of the frequency in. A lot of that stuff is explained in, I believe, Voyagers Volume 2, the first part of it, where they explain some of the detail on morphogenetic waves and the operation of the planetary Templar in stellar activation cycles. And it's worth reading if you want to know, about stellar activation cycles, because there's a lot of good. That's this book for anybody who doesn't know. This one, Voyagers Volume 2, 2nd edition, Secrets of Amenti. That has a whole bunch of stuff in it, but it has a lot on stellar activation cycles. So if you want more information on that kind of stuff, you can read that. And we're progressively updating. The information you're getting now, as far as the history and the agendas that are going down, even with the last printing of this book, which was not that long ago, the agenda has already shifted again with, got more serious than it was noted in the book. Anyway, okay, so that's the gate system and the interfaces. What do we have next? Oh yeah, here we go. Now, here's where we start to understand some interesting things. This is where we begin. Remember, we have stargates, that's what they are. They run the primal life force currents. Remember the 15-dimensional matrix with the 2 Cathara grids? Well, actually, the Cathara grid, the primal light Cathara grid, light and sound one, that goes with our particular 15-dimensional time matrix, isn't up here. It would actually go off at an angle this way. See this? That has to do with the angular rotation of particle spin that literally particles spin on, their axis that they spin on, and it has to do with the Merkaba axes of the energy that's in each of those systems. So there is a 90-degree shift in angular rotation of particle spin and Merkaba axis between our primal light fields and sound fields and our dimensional system. Here's where we begin to see how it's not just 2 that plug in, but one 15-dimensional matrix plugs in to its parallel this way. Here's the 1, right? Has dimensions 1 through 12, 13, 14, and 15, the primal sound fields. That's here. Okay. All right. Here is another set of dimensions 1 through 12, another primal light field. This is the parallel 15-dimensional time matrix. They're linked together. At the center, I'll show you this bigger in a second too. At the center, this little area here forms another Cathara grid, a small one. This is the inner Eka universe. And it goes all the way up, which will show you the stairway to heaven. Now, this, let me put the next one on that shows it bigger. Okay. Oh wait, do I have that one there yet? Which one's that? Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh, in fact, let me put the stairway on first, and then I'll walk it up that way. Yeah, I'll put the stairway on. Now, that's just the beginning. The stairway to heaven I talked about. Yeah, let's do bottom first, honey. All right. That's what we just saw on that other thing here, our 12 dimensions, right? And our primal light field. Our 12 dimensions, our primal light field. Parallel 12 dimensions, parallel primal light field. So that's 2 15-dimensional time matrices. And the inner Eka system. That, if you look at how these gates are here, line up, they form another Cathara grid, like this. The forms what's called the Akasha. This is one of the God worlds. This is what they consider the God worlds. The inner Eka God worlds is considered the lowest God world. The first one you'd go through on your way back up. That expands out to another system called the Akasha system. Another set of reality fields, interwoven reality fields. That expands. Let me bring that down, honey, please. This here expands and becomes part of a bigger one. The pattern keeps building. This is the stairway to heaven. You finally get to the top. Now we'll talk about these a little bit, each of the pieces. This is a consolidated look at the Echo map of the God World gates. Remember, each one of these is a set of stargates, okay, in a 15-dimensional matrix. Another thing I want to show you with these, in fact, I'll show it to you piece by piece now. It's a little easier when you see it piece by piece. We'll start at the bottom. Yeah, it's the picture more than the words. I'm not going to go into that stuff. Yeah, all right. Now, let me get this on here, this guy, yeah. All right. Again, here's our 12 stargates, right? And these are primal light and sound field stargates. Each of these, remember we had talked about radial bodies that form around each three-dimensional system or each density level. There's, this one's hard to follow too. 1, that's density 1 radial body, does that. 2, density 2 radial body. 3, density 3 radial body. And then density 4 radial body, the Christos radial body, is here. You see it connects. It's at a different angle and it connects in with the primal light and sound fields. Now there would be, every time you see a Cathara grid, it implies this structure of 1, 2, 3 radial bodies, then the fourth one. All right. This is where we get the concept of the 7 higher and 7 lower heavens. All right. The heavens are the lowest step of the stairway to heaven. Now we're down here, right, in this area, in density 1 of our 15-dimensional time matrix, dimensions 1, 2, and 3, density 1. So we're in this bubble here, all right? See the dark line? That forms a bubble. And then there's another one that comes down over that. Notice, too, the bubbles are really akasha-shaped things or teardrop-shaped things. They're elliptical spheres with a little teardrop as if somebody's pulling the top of it. They emerge through what are called locks. Now we saw the Cathara grid with the Cathara centers, right? They're the stargates. There are other things between them that regulate the flow of frequency between the gates. These are called locks. There are little tiny locks between each dimension, and that means between each stargate. So between Stargate 1 and Stargate 2, there'd be a little lock there, and between 2 and 3, there'd be a little lock. But the big locks are the density locks. They're the ones that have to be released for something to pass from one density system into another density system. So if you want to go into the higher stargates above 3, you would have to go through and have the coding in your template activated for the density lock that goes with it. So there's down here, and you'll see like when we get into this, the locks are all on there too, all these little guys. That's why it looks so confusing where you can go cross-eyed looking at it. So we have down here, it's the 0-point lock, which is literally is a lock that opens into the primal light fields when the other locks are opened. So the LZ is lock 0 point. Lock 1, density lock 1, density lock 2, density lock 3, and then density lock 4 is up in here. Again, up in here ends up in the inner Eka universal system, in their Stargate system. So we have gates and locks and keys, which are the specific mathematical patterns in our shields that when they turn on, they run the specific frequencies that create the right vibrations that open the locks and the gates that allow us to pass. And those keys, fortunately for us, are expressed in 2 ways. We don't have to run around with a big, keychain. The keys are expressed as symbols, consolidated, compact, mathematical symbol codes, like the Akasha. And the Akasha is one major one. So these symbols are, remember they were going to do a book, and we just never had time to do it, Time Traveler's Guide to Symbols and Their Uses. Because the symbols are the mathematical programs that when you run them through your consciousness into the right parts of your body and your template, it will activate the corresponding frequencies. Now this becomes very handy. First you've got to get yourself healed, and you can use this to heal your template because we're all running around with damaged template. We can heal our bodies, we can activate our flame bodies, which we'll get into a little later, and once we have that healing done, these are the symbols that we would call to mind, or the tones that go with them. The symbol is the expression in light, visual, right? Every symbol has a tone, a sound vibration that goes with it. Either using either or both, a symbol or a tone that is the key for one of the locks or the gates would literally be, you could hum yourself through a Stargate. You don't have to have all sorts of fancy calculators that keep track of really wild mathematics for you. It's that simple. So it's the ancient sciences, they're as complex as you want them to be, because every one of these symbols could be translated numerically, but not with numbers here. It's a base 12 system, and literally the math here isn't big enough to translate the mathematics of these. These are like mega computer programs that our computers look like, like tiny little calculators compared to. So when we work with the symbol codes, what we are doing is working with the keys to the gates and to the locks. The locks become very important. The locks, if you can open the locks, they trigger the opening of the gates. So when we're working with building our own flame bodies and getting our template activated as fast as possible, the fastest thing to work with are the lock codes. We'll create more rapid template activation, more rapid shield activation than using the gate codes themselves that are coded into the body. So the Dance for Life and Love program uses what are called the VECA codes. The VECA codes go with these systems here in this particular part of the Stairway to Heaven. This is called we have the 7 high heavens of one universal VECA and the 7 low heavens of one universal VECA. All right, this whole thing, these 4 cathargrids stuck together with the inner echo one at the center, is called a universal VECA system. Okay, it has to do with vectors, time vectors. All right, it's the universal VECA system. Now, the 7 higher and 7 lower heavens work this way. Remember how you've got each? You got 1, 2, 3. Then you'd have, for each cathargrid, you have those 3 bubbles, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And the 7th is the one that's actually shared. It's interwoven between the primal light field and the 12-dimensional field. These would be the 7 lower heavens here. Actually, no, these are considered the 7 lower heavens. How do I have this broken down? Pardon me, I haven't done this in a bit. Yeah. This one and this one. Yeah. Yeah, I do have it broken down that way. That makes sense. It isn't, though. Wait a minute. I'm trying to see something, because technically the 7 lower heavens are these. How do I have that broken down? Yeah, because technically this is parallel. This is parallel dimensions 1 through 12, and our dimensions 1 through 12. They are the 7 lower heavens. And the light fields that go with each of those are the 7 higher heavens. So that's how that is broken down. It's actually, I think it's written right. It just looks confusing because I also have these things out here that has to do with other stuff, I think. Wait, back corner, higher heavens. Yeah, higher heaven. Yeah. I'm just trying to read this myself. Yeah, that's right. So we got the 7 lower, because you have the set 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 for each set of 2 of those grids, right? 7 lower and 7 higher heavens. The higher heavens are the light field ones. The lower ones are the dimensional ones for here in parallel, for our time matrix in parallel. And at the center, you have the ECA, Inner Universal System, which is another Stargate system, but it's a double Stargate system, where their primal light field, their primal cathargrid, and their 12-dimensional cathargrid are in the same place. They're not separated from each other. They're not polarized from each other. So it's from these areas right now that we're receiving assistance. These areas are connected directly up, this is the real path of the middle pillar, up the whole Stairway to Heaven. All of those forms that, as you will see, this is the smallest. We're down in the smallest little part of the universe. This set of gates on the outside here forms another cathargrid that again plugs into another set. So it builds, the Stairway to Heaven builds upward. Actually, how it was created was it builds downward. It started with the big one, and then it worked inside of itself, and all of these little things exist within inside each other. So we're down here in this particular VECA, and in the VECA systems, each one of these is called a quadrant. So we're in VECA quadrant 4 down here, and we're in density 1 of VECA quadrant 4. That's where our system is, like our planet and our sun and our galaxies when we look out there. We're in VECA quadrant 4. Now, this builds to form the next step in the Stairway to Heaven. Now, if you wanted to get from here to any place out of here, to any place like in inner Earth, you'd have to go up through all these gates to get to these gates. Here's the main gate connection, and this becomes important because this is where the frequencies are going to be running from primarily. See where our If you look at our numbers here, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. This big circle is our 11 gate, right? And this here is our 12 gate. But our 11 gate, if you look at the little Cathara grid, that's the inner Eka universal gate system, our universal gate 11 is in the same place as the inner Eka universe gate 3, universal gate 3. So the 311 connection and the 1213 connection here that you're seeing here, that's not a gate in their world. That is actually the center point of the Cathara grid, which is this point here. So this here, our 12, is centered in their lock 6. All right? So, yeah. I mean, this is complicated stuff when you get into analyzing these maps. You go, where am I? But what we want you to understand, what's most important to understand, you don't have to go run out and figure out how to climb the stairway right now. Knowing the stairway is there is what's most important first. Knowing it exists is, first, that's an accomplishment in this day and age. And then realizing how working with your own shields is how you bring back the ability to participate in moving through that stairway consciously. We were all created to do that. It was our birthright. We were the guardians of the stairway, but we kind of fell down, and it's time to wake up. So this is the first level. This is the Veka, universal Veka. All right, with the 7 higher and 7 lower heavens. Every universal Veka has 7 higher and 7 lower heavens. Now, there's more than one universal Veka. We'll go up to the next one, please. The next. That's technically that's in the Dance 4 programs, and what I'm trying to do is I'm not giving a full Dance 4 programs here. I told you that we gave that in Phoenix, and that was a good take, perfect take for it. So people that want that part of it, we didn't build this one as a Dance for Life workshop. I'm trying to give you the most important parts, but to get into that level of detail, we're not going to get into the shadow body and flame body. So that's why. He was asking if I'm going to explain how the energy circulates through these systems. And technically, when we talk, I'll just do real quick, how primal life force currents come in from literally the original Manu, Mane, and Ire fields of God force, how they come down the stairway to heaven. There's a very specific set of patternings, how they spiral down in through the universes and get down to our system. They come in through the Eka in our system and then come out through our primal light fields and things. There's a pattern, a flow pattern of how the energy circulates in and out. And I'm not going to get into that now. It's not that important to understand for what we're doing, but it is covered more in the Dance 4 programs. And that's what he was asking about. Okay. Lunch is ready. All right. Well, how about this? Okay, there's a thing I wanted to get to before lunch that I'm going to give you a sneak peek on it. It would just let's stay right there, okay? We'll come back after lunch to exactly where we are, because I don't want to try to barrel on in 5 minutes through the rest of the Eka maps, because it'll be just a blur that went by in a flash, and you probably won't remember any of it. And it is important to get just to see how the building happens, because when we get to the top, that's where we start to find out a little bit more about God, the structure that God holds itself in order for creation to take place within it. So we'll save that part of it for after lunch. But there's one thing I did want to share with you that I found very exciting when they came to us. We finally have them on overheads. In the Cathara grid, you know how it has those lines that connect all the little Cathara centers?
Yeah.
Well, they're crystal caverns in the Stargate systems. They found some of the early ones, like some of the more surface level ones, recently in Chihuahua, Mexico. And a friend of ours, who happened to just come to one workshop, then she got invited to go on this expedition. It was like with scientists and stuff. And she came back, and it was funny, she brought this material back. She said, I don't know if you'd be interested in it, right when we were given the information on the crystal caverns. And we were teaching it in a workshop. She brought it back. So finally we've got them on Mylar. Just wanted to share them with you. She made these for us. And it's showing her in visiting these caverns. These are selenite rods, selenite crystal rods. Selenite crystal rods have been for eons the machinery of choice for running the Templar. They are natural, most of them, are natural organic constructs that in the inner Eka universe, for example, remember I talked about the 12 Q sites that connect to Earth? Well, they connect, those points on Earth connect directly through frequency to a set of what are called crystal pylon temples, 12 crystal pylon temples of the inner Eka universal system that are on inner Eka Earth, okay? They look like these. These are just little ones compared to the size and magnitude of the selenite crystals that are used to run the inner Eka temples. But these are the frequency transducers, and they're on this planet too. Now, most of them are naturally occurring, but some of them were seeded here. This particular batch of them were actually seeded here. They were spliced in from the planet that was called Nibiru. And they're actually part of the BEAST apparatus. They're programmed to run reverse frequency. Yeah. So they're beautiful, but they're powerful as well. This was just a small setup that has to do with QSite 4, which is over in, I believe, Aguascalientes, Mexico. So these were an interface. They don't know that, of course, the scientists who have found these crystals and the whole bit, they're trying to figure out, oh, neat, what they are, how they form, that kind of stuff. But it was kind of interesting to see how the universe provided. When we were just given this workshop explaining about the crystal pylon temples and the crystal caverns, that when we go through stargates, it's like some of them you would actually go down. You have to go down before you can go up. You would go down into certain areas into the earth and into caverns and caves, and there would be certain areas that you would find that some of them are beautiful like this. Others just look like stone. But there are certain areas that if you carry the frequency activated in your body, you would see wavering, like the stone would actually look like you could walk through it, and you could. All right? These guys work that way too, but the scientists don't know how to run them yet. Yes?
You had mentioned one time that we actually couldn't see a lot of these temples because of the frequency. What made it happen that this frequency kind of went down so we were able to actually see it?
Yeah, that's a good point. I had mentioned in other workshops that right now there's a lot of these temples. There's 24 main bases, and this is just a tiny base, and there's lots of tiny ones all over the place. Well, why haven't we found them? Why can't we see them? Why haven't our scientists found them? And it actually has to do with their under-frequency cloaking. This one, because they had to activate it, because this is keyed to QSite 4, and it's keyed to Giza, which is Stargate 4. Because they were running some nasty programs, and they were trying to get Gate 4 that's connected to the solar Gate 4. They're messing with the solar gate. They had to activate it fully, and that made it so the cloaking shield had to come down. So they had to find an excuse. So, for it, like, uh-oh, it's going to get found. It had been found before by certain people. I mean, heck, there was a door on it when they found it. This time, from what I heard, that there was somebody had, years ago put some kind of doorway on the entrance part to it. So somebody's been there before. But these are starting to show, and they will start to find more and more of them because they have to activate them. The ones that are running them, that are using them for the black hole work, need to activate them now. It's like now or never. So they're going to be finding more of them. But there's bunches of them that are also being healed by the Guardians because the crystals are alive. They're beings that are being abused. They're not beings that are wanting to participate in the negative activities. So there are major efforts being done by the Guardian races. And when we help to do our flame bodies, our Amaray flame bodies, which we'll learn more about later, we will help to anchor the Amaray flame frequencies, which are the healing frequencies, onto the planet. It will help heal all of the crystal base in the planet. And it will go through even the ones that were imported from Nibiru, like some of these were. Some of these crystals, they don't realize it yet, were actually put in at different times. Some are older than others, and not all of them were organic to Earth. Some of them were actually brought from Nibiru and seeded in, just like you can, what do they call it, grafting on plants, where you can put one piece of one plant onto another and create something else. Well, that's what they do with crystals as well. That's part of the thing. Yeah, I wasn't sure what the story was. Yeah. Okay. That's an interesting point. As was saying that Leela, the girl that's in the pictures, was saying that the scientists can't figure out why they're so big when they're less than 50,000 years old, right? At the size they are, they should be much, much older than that, and some of them aren't, but they're that big. This has to do with the imported ones and things like that. So I just thought it would be interesting to share those pictures with you, because when we're talking about stargates and all this template stuff that you can't see before your eyes, it's like you can get it, but it doesn't quite anchor it. When I saw these pictures, like, whoa, does that anchor it? That's the closest picture we've got of a stargate right now, and I just wanted to share that with you before lunch. Yeah. Yes, whoops,
you were saying before that we have to have all 12 strands of DNA activated, including each of the 12 subharmonics, in order to get through a stargate.
Yeah.
Well, if our templates are that corrected then, in order to do that, would that imply that we're immortal and that we're totally healthy?
If we get our templates cleared to that point, we would be. Right now, nobody's got their templates clear to that point. Nobody's got 12-strand activation on this planet. Everybody's got a shadow body they need to clear before that can happen. The reason they're giving us the Amareya flame technologies at this point, this fast now, is it's the fastest way to get everything cleared, because there's nobody that could survive direct passage through one of the gates right now. This is where spaceships come in. All right? If it ever gets to the point where evacs do take place, and you have bunches of people who might be able to sustain. See, there's a burst of energy that's needed. You don't have to hold full 12-strand activation on the other side. What you need it for is to get through. You need 4.25 strand activation to be able to sustain in the inner ecosystem in inner Earth. So if you could activate the system just long enough to get you through, you don't have to be able to hold it. And that's what we're aiming for now. Got to start there for everybody. But there will be some people that they're close. They're close, but they just can't quite activate all of it enough where it would destroy the template. It would kill them to go through the gate. Some of those people, if it gets really bad and they do evac, they will use mechanical spaceship technologies, which are actually a form of advanced Merkaba. They will use it as a buffer field to get people through a gate, if necessary. But they're teaching us to not rely on external technologies whenever possible. We don't need a spaceship if you got a Merkaba that works, right? So in answer to that question. Anyway, I think we probably better go for lunch so we can get back, and hope you have a good lunch. And, oh, what time is lunch? How long is lunch? Oh, come on. Alrighty, I hope you all had a good lunch. I think we're going to be having a busy afternoon. Usually we'll have like a decent-sized dinner break and then come back and like go till 10:30 or whatever. But it's hard to get any food here, so we're going to run it like Az was saying. We're going to go till 8 o'clock, and we'll have like a 20-minute or so comfort break between now and 8 o'clock. But dinner the workshop will be done at 8, so you can go and still have time to get into a restaurant if you want to for dinner. All right, so it'll work out better that way. Plus, maybe we can get some sleep tonight too. Okay, thank you. Okay, so now we're going to pick up where we left off, and where we left off was on the stairway to heaven, on the bottom step of the stairway to heaven. I just put this, let me find my little pointer here. I just put this here just to remind us where we just came from. Remember, we're down here. This is our Vecca quadrant that we're in, our 12 universal stargates, and Earth is down here in density 1, which is dimensions 1, 2, and 3. This is our primal light field. This is the parallel 15-dimensional time matrix. That's where you'd have parallel Earth down in their density 1. This is their primal light field, and that is called the 7 higher and 7 lower heavens of the universal Vecca. Okay. Now we go from there to the next step up. The universal Vecca forms what's called an Akasha corridor. This is another larger Kathara grid that forms from the gate connections, the 4 primary gate connections that are the ends of the other ones. The Vecca is inside of the Akasha, right? Now, this is called an Akasha corridor. This will connect again on the next step up to another set of another configuration like this. So you'll have 4 of these with these inside of them. All right, remember, this is a set of 2 15-dimensional time matrices with the inner Eka universe structure at the core. Now, in the Akasha, when these come together, and I'll show you the next one up where you have 4 Akasha corridors, they will come together, and each will have the 2 time matrix, the 2 parallel 15-dimensional time matrices and the Eka system within them. We can go to the next one, please. I'm not going to cover these extensively, like all this stuff. We cover that in the Dance 4 programs. What I want you to get familiar with is how these gates connect, and to actually see the stairway, the gate passage. This is how you got here in the first place. You had to come down through this whole gate system to get down into this one. So that implies you have a part of yourself, of your whole identity as a God being, in each of those stations of reality, in each of those reality systems. And each of them that's built on the Kathara will have its own 15-dimensional structure and its own experience within 12 dimensions of that structure of space, time, and matter density. Once you get beyond the D12 level in any of those levels, you're beyond the perception of linear time and space as we know it. So each of those levels has a dimensional structure, which means it has a hologram. It has a 3-dimensional hologram that you can walk around in. All right, now, here we're in what's called the Akasha A. This is the next one up. Each one of these in that square, in that cross configuration inside, is an Akasha corridor. And inside of each of the Akasha corridors are the Veka universes. So we would, let's see, let me see if I have ours marked on here. I don't think I do. We were, I can never remember the numbers of which we are. We're number, I'm not going to try to find this. There's another map that has it where it shows, in fact, the stairway one, we'll come back to that at the end of this. I'll show you where we are up the chain, like where our universe is located in relation to the rest, but I don't have that on every one of these maps. Anyway, this is, each one of these 4 Kathara grids here is an Akasha corridor, and 4 of them together form the configuration of the Akasha A. That's the next higher God world. There's one more step up to the final, the first creation level, which is the first one you'd pass through on the way down. All right, and notice they each form whenever one of these cross configurations of gates forms. They form the inner Eka system as well. Now the inner Eka system is actually what forms first, and these spiral out from it. So the process of coming back in is spiraling back through the gate system and back into the core, which will take you up to the next level. And then you'd spiral through that 4 set of gate system and then back up through its center to the next level. And it's literally, this is the path of ascension. It is the path of ascending in frequency. Your frequency progressively raises, and your being expands until you activate all of your entire shield configuration, your Maharic shield, which holds your 12-dimensional levels of stuff. That gets you out of matter in one system, and then you go completely into antimatter, or light form, thermoplasm, and then you go from there into the next level up of matter in the next God world level until you get all the way up to the top. Now, once you get to the point where you have 12 strands activated, you have a lot more consciousness available to you. There are options of evolution that you have a lot of choice as to. You don't just have to, because you went down, you don't have to go back up the same path you came. There's all sorts of things to explore in the hologram. The cosmic hologram is awesome. It's just massive and huge. And the amazing thing is it's all taking place in the same space. Because actually it's all just a point in the consciousness of God. But the illusions of space, time, and matter are characteristic of the way consciousness is being bent in to look at itself, where it appears as if it's separate. So it can see itself in pieces, so it can see externalization. So there is a point where we come to realize and embody the cognition of, and it's not something you can put into words easily, of knowing that space and time and all of those things aren't really real, where you're completely beyond any of those orientations. Once you start to get into Christ consciousness, you begin to get a feel for that. Once you get into Christ consciousness in the Veka worlds, you get a little feel for it. When you get into Christ consciousness on the Akasha, or the Eka, and then the Akasha or the Akasha A worlds, you get even more of a feel for it. There are levels of consciousness that are just awesome, that we can't even fathom, really, down here, particularly when we don't even have our own level of consciousness, our 12 dimensions of consciousness embodied. But creation is massive in content, and this is part of the joy of it, of realizing, we're sitting here on this little planet in this little system, not knowing what we're connected to or what that means. Our scientists are sending things up in space, hoping they can find something someday that has life on it, that like our planet. They have no idea. This whole system is teeming with life. The whole system is composed of life in the first place. Every atom is conscious. It's conscious of itself, and it's conscious of its relationship to the things around it. Now, it won't have the set. Your atoms don't think in the same way you do, but it's because of your atoms' consciousness and their perception of self, their perception of self and knowing themselves as an aspect of God or a face that God wears. Altogether, their group identity holds the support that gives you your ability to know yourself as a singular identity. So it's an amazing orchestra of sound and light that we are all a part of. We can never, ever, ever be separate from God. And that's what's one of the most joyful aspects of these teachings. When we begin to understand the divine science that it's all built upon, we start to, there's a part of it. I could feel the shift when they showed me the echo maps, and I'm starting to get it. Wow, you just really can't be away from God. I am a living piece of this thing called God. And that's when you start to look at the definitions of God that other people have put on them. Other men or women have decided they were going to define God in terms of their own psyche, as opposed to letting God reveal itself and its truth through them. And then they forced those belief systems and those definitions on generations upon generations of other people. What if they were erroneous? That's what we're dealing with here. We've had teachings. These teachings have been around for ages. They were the founders' teachings. The first time that they were committed to a form for record was 950 billion years ago, when this time matrix, this particular matrix, was formed. That's a long time. It's why these are called the founders' race teachings. They are the original Emerald Covenant teachings. The Emerald Covenant was the original creation agreement that was formed between three groups of beings from the higher echo worlds, that they would come in and create this universe. They were the three founders' races. So some of that information is in the books that you have there. We talk about the Brenau races and the Christos founders races. Those guys came from these higher worlds, and they seeded progressively, just like Source created within itself. The first level of creation with the Manau, the Mane, and the Ire. And within the Manau, Mano, and Ire, those three God forces created within themselves more structures, the Christos and the Crystalla, as we'll see soon. And they could, it's a creation within itself. It continually goes within itself. And it's kind of like being wrapped in a big bubble of eternal love. And when you start to realize that there is no outside to that bubble, there's nobody that's been evicted. Even the ones in the black hole, they are still within that bosom of God. However, their experience of that is limited because they've lost their connection and their memory and their understanding. But they are still loved. And when they go through the final consequence of their actions, which eventually will be in their universe, will be implosion of their universe, they will go back to space dust. But what that means is they will go back to units, it's undifferentiated units of consciousness. They won't have a template anymore as far as an organized scalar template, but they will go back. They're units of consciousness. Energy can't be created or destroyed. It just changes form. They will change form, and they will go back to units of consciousness, particle, particum, and particum, little scalar waves, that go back into the original shields that they had fallen from in the first place. The only difference between the path of ascension and the path of implosion is that the ones who ascend get to remember, and they get to remember the whole process and take the memory of the whole experience with them all the way up through, and they hold the knowledge of how to come in and out, so they become masters of the matrix, which means they can come in. And once you get to that point and you realize you can create anything you want and experience anything you want anywhere, you find you need less and less and less. Been there, done that. Had that, made one of those, experienced that. You find the one thing that becomes the motivation is love and a desire to help those who are stuck. So the desire to serve becomes your one most fulfilling objective. It's the one thing you want to create. It's a gift you give to yourself because you want to express, and you've already expressed so much that there's no thing in particular you want to create. You've had every type of experience you can imagine. You want to give that freedom. And when you see others and are aware that there's others in systems like ours or fallen systems that forgot, that don't know they're free, that don't know they're eternal, the only thing left to do that feels really good, that's really exciting, that makes it all worthwhile, is to go back in the matrix and to say, hey, this is how it works. Look, you can get out. So other people can experience the same type of joy, because it is absolute joy when you embody that freedom. Right now, even with the teachings that we have available, even with the mutations this planet carries and everything on it, just knowing the fact that we're part of this and we have this as a potential can bring a feeling. It's like a wave of joy that you can almost feel ripple through your whole body. You start to expand. Even though we can't close our eyes and imagine a picture of something that pops out in 3D instantly, there are levels of reality, like in these spaces. This is where we have to learn how to control our minds, our 3D minds down here, because if we get up here, our thoughts immediately will pop out of our heads. be very careful what you think. You spend a lot of time purposely not thinking anything, because you'll be manifesting stuff left, right, and sideways. So we learn as we go spiritual lessons that have to do with stillness of mind, centering of focus, just beingness, which means I'm just experiencing rather than focusing or trying to do anything, right? Because every thought you think becomes an action or an item when you get into these places. And that can be, if you're having a bad day and you're kind of growling around, you create all sorts of nasty little thought forms running around. You actually give them life. Because we do, and the more we go up in these systems, the more these frequencies that activate in our bodies and our consciousness, the more we realize we are indeed created in the image of God. And God creates by thinking. The intention of the thought makes it real, brings it into reality. God thought up this whole structure of how that would come to be. But we do the same thing. Every time we think a thought, we release a pattern. We release a template, a scalar wave template, a manifestation, a blueprint for manifestation, somewhere. Now, most of the time, it's not directly in our range of perception. Somebody's seeing it somewhere. It's really interesting to think that, well, if you're going to see something as solid, this is one of the base rules of perception, how it works here, is you will see it solid, what is exactly one full dimensional spectrum below your station of consciousness. So if your mind or your awareness is focused in dimension 3, you will see dimension 2 as the solid hologram. So we're throwing off thought forms all the time. And those thought forms might not be able to be immediately perceivable by us. We have to learn how to move it into our range of perception, which is a little tricky, the mechanics of manifesting directly. But other beings and other things are experiencing our thought forms all the time. The earth is experiencing every thought form that we have. We actually create little thought beings, weird shapes, things that look like shadow forms, things that look like light forms, that go running around in the woods, all sorts of things. I mean, we are actually creating these, that we're throwing them off into the atmosphere and don't realize it. A lot of those things that people are starting to be able to take pictures of, little fairy folk and things like that are popping up on films here and there when people are like out in the woods taking pictures. Some of these are not direct throw-offs from us, but others are literally thought form races that were created by either us consciously at once upon a time or are being thrown off from us now through our shadow bodies and through our conscious thought forms. So we are living creators. We just forgot. And that's scary, because if you take the power of God and you take a small part of that and put it in a little package, but then the package forgets that it has that power, but the power still runs, it can be a very dangerous thing. That's what we're doing now. We're manifesting without realizing we're manifesting, so we seem to have no control over what's being manifested around us. As we get up into these spaces, we learn more and more how to direct our thoughts. And here's this is school, all right? This is Earth School right now. Here's where we need to learn how to hone our mind and our mental focus. And there's a lot of teachings out there now that are telling you, oh, that's just mental body stuff. You don't need the detail. We're above that. We're doing spiritual stuff. You're not going to get any spiritual stuff into that body down here unless you have your mind open and understanding to process those frequencies. So the mind and mental training is just as important as anything else in getting your spirit into your body and your consciousness into your body. So if you run across belief systems, that's another little trick that you can tell. Remember where they ask you to put your power thing? Well, that's one way to tell what if it's really trying to get you into your spiritual empowerment or lie to you and get you someplace else. Another way to define that is, wait a minute, sorry, he's doing it again. All right. Yeah, this is happening more and more these days. I just got redirected. He's telling me to hurry up. We're never going to get to what we need to. This Ma. Yeah, I wish you'd just manifest already and let him see you and tell me directly. It really bugs me because it'll be like, I'll be right, like on a line of thought, and it's like somebody tapping you on the shoulder and you jump and you go, huh? Oh, where was I? One of those kind of things, except I usually can't find the where was I. That's how I know it's an interruption, because it's like it zaps the pattern right out of my head, where usually I can redirect and I can find myself if I just, lose myself. But when I'm having help getting lost, I get redirected and I can't find the tail end of that last thought. So we'll go back to this. All right, you happy now? Yeah. All right, yeah. See, I do go on tangents sometimes, if you haven't noticed. But they all say something. Yeah. Anyway, all right, we're back here. This is the Akasha A. Now we had the Veka worlds, right? The Veka worlds, which are somewhere down in here. Okay? We have the Akasha worlds, which are these guys, these biggers. These are the Vekas, these little guys. These are the Akasha corridors. And this is the Akasha A. Now, of course, this plugs in to something else. And one more step up on the ladder, or the stairway to heaven, gets us to the top. Now, this is the beginning of understanding the top. All right, which one is this? This is called the Akasha Aya. All right, now these words, again, are the ancient words that are the translations of the primary audible tonal vibrations of the energy involved. So they're the actual vibrational identities, the sounds that can be audibly translated of the vibrational identities of those energy forms. All right, we have, here we go again. All right, down in here, yeah, okay, this is, I'll take it from the top down. These guys here are the Akasha A corridors. These guys here are the Akasha, no, the Akasha, wait a minute, here we go again. These guys here are the Akasha A, and I believe they're spectra, aren't they? Yeah, spectra, they're called spectra. So that is one Akasha A spectra. Inside of the Akasha A spectra, you have your 4 Akasha corridors, and inside each of the Akasha corridors, you have your 4 Vekas, the 4 quadrants, Veka quadrants. So that is basically the gate connection that gets you to the top. And all the way up through, you have these center points that all connect. All these center points connect together. The gate systems connect together, and they form what's called the path, of the real path of the middle pillar, which is literally the reality, the inner, they call them inner because they're like the yolk out of which the formation around it extends. They're like the yolk inside of an egg. So when we get to the top, here's where we start to understand something called the Christos and the Kristalla. This thing here, which is the first, there are 2 first Kathara grids. You know how everything is based on those 2 Kathara grids? One, the primal one that has the light and sound field imprint, and one, the dimensionalized one? Well, the imprint, the first set of 12 and 12 vibrations that individuated within the Mano, Mane, and Ire force are called the Christos grid and the Kristalla grid. Now, they are living formations of consciousness, fixed points of vibration that are identity, energy that is eternal, that will hold that form eternally because it agreed to do that. This Kathara grid that forms the Akasha A on the outside is called the Christos with a K, K-R-I-S-T-O-S. This small one inside is called the Kristalla. They're the first, these templates of living scalar wave consciousness that are manifestations of the Mane and Ire force. This Kristalla is a manifestation of the Mane force, or the divine masculine God force. The Christos, sorry. And the Kristalla on the inside is a manifestation of the Ire, divine feminine God force. They set the first template, the first mathematical template is set at the top. It's one of the first things of creation. And from that, all of these other things come into manifestation within them. So within the Christos is the Kristalla. And we'll show you in a minute, there's more to what's at the top. We can go to the next one, please. Okay. Actually, let me put the other, there should be the one, there's one more I want to put, I think, before this. Is this the one? Yeah, where it takes you through the stages. And I'll put that one after it. That's good. All right. Now again, here's the Christos grid, and here's the Kristalla grid, right? We're going to ignore the circles for the moment, but the circles I want you to see are the big ones around the outside here. That will take us up to here. There's a sequence of, this is how the creation perpetually moves itself into creation and then back out again, forming this whole entire structure within itself. Okay, the Unici, which is a point of all union. All right, this is the point where these 3 God forces, eternal manifestations of God, which is first the Manu, that is the void space, and it is composed of a certain type of scalar waveform. Within the Manu, or within the void, God spoke the word, and the word was the vibration, or the first sound, the pre-sound vibration, the ire, and from that combination emerged the Mane field around it. So this is the word Unisci refers to that original space. Actually, if you want to space and time are illusions, I know. The original space, thought that God individuated within itself. It had a thought that it wanted to create individuation and externalization. And that thought formed these fields, and these fields in tangible terms can be viewed as massive elliptical spheres of standing waves of consciousness. And from those standing waves, a whole process comes into play. That through this process, the divine mechanics, or the divine design that allows for the manifest hologram was created. So everything is actually taking place within these. Got to be everywhere, but this is like a point in the mind of God, if you want to look at it that way. And within that, all of this and all of what was inside of that, remember how he had all of those the stair steps going down, all of that is contained within the Unisci. So this is why when we said, yesterday that, we're the Melchizedek cloister, holy order of the Unisci. This is what it refers to, all the way up to the top. The other guys that don't have that, make that distinction are teaching a different set of twisted teachings. And sometimes they were cooperative with us, but other times they were trying to take everything into a black hole. But the order of the Unisci is referring to this, and this is the original three forces. Literally, like, say, pools of consciousness, or big spheres of consciousness that God created within its own mind, and first you'd have the Manu, which is the void, and within the void you had the next sound, pre-sound space, and between the two emerged the light space. These are before light, though. These are pre-light and pre-sound. But it's from those three patterns, the still point and the Manu and the ire and the Mane, that light and sound later emerge when you get into the dimensional structure. Now, that is the first step of creation, and it is perpetual. Actually, they stay. They're just like there. They kind of always were there because, again, time isn't time. When you get up there, time is just an illusion in the hologram. These spaces of consciousness are eternal. They always exist, always did exist. There was no beginning and end point, but that is the structure they hold eternally. And within that structure, the next step of creation perpetually holds itself in manifestation, and that is the simultaneous creation of the 24 points of vibration. And there's been teachings that have twisted this into the 24 elders before the throne and that kind of stuff, except they changed what it meant because that was put into what were called the Anunnaki teachings, which are black hole teachings. But originally, all of those twisted teachings were taking pieces of the divine physics that belong to everybody, that is the creation physics, that always is, always has been, whether you believe it or not. It's still there, and it's still what your body and the universe is running on. So anyway, we have the Kristalla 12-point grid, which is the expression of the ire, and we have the Christos, which is the expression of the Mane, and they exist within the Manu field, and they create themselves. See, that you have the Manu field, the Mane field, and the ire field. And within the ire field, the Kristalla is formed, and within the Mane field, the Christos is formed. And it connects all the way through into the Manu field. That is the first formation of what is called the Kathara grid, or that 12 point. This is the base 12 system. It is the mathematics imbued within, and I couldn't tell you how, like at this level, what the mathematics might look like. But it is the mathematics of the base 12 and the 12 with the 12 in polarity that allow for the inflow, the perpetual inflow and outflow of consciousness and energy. It is what creates an eternal life system as opposed to a finite life system. It allows an open, perpetual circulation of consciousness and energy into and out of manifestation. So when we get to after the Kristalla and the Christos are created within the Unisci, or the Manu, Mane, and Ire field. The next step is what's called the Ruche God Seed Core. Now this is interesting. The mathematics are contained. Remember the Akasha symbol. And in the Akasha symbol, which we'll put up again, that's the one on the front of your books, I think. Yeah, on the front of those books. There is the Ruche. Okay, now what the Ruche is actually a setting, after these grids are set. Within these grids, the forces of the Manu, Mane, and Ire combined to create a set of what are called 12 pillars. The first pillars, or standing scalar wave pillars of energy, that are the anchoring rods all the way down through. It's through the Ruche that the Ekas form, that the Eka inner yolks form, that allow for the formation of the things that extend out from the Ekas. So the Ruche pillars form this way. You have one point that is polarized into two, and then that polarizes, making four, either 4 points, and then each of those polarize to form within the Christos and Crystalla this configuration of 12 anchoring pillars, and that collectively is called the Ruche. Now, the Ruche, the reason they've given us this much information is because when we get to tomorrow, talking about the Amareya Arc project and what needs to be done to help this planet and to help ourselves now, the problem is so severe in this particular universal Veka that the gates all the way up to here need to be open, and these pillars need to be brought all the way down through, like at their full strength, as strong as they can be run in the lower Vekas. That's not always done. Usually they will come through and they will bring energy through, like in bursts, in like over like a billion-year cycles. I don't know what the time cycle is on it, but they need to be brought in, the frequencies of them, to anchor and hold our Veka from falling into the black hole system at this point. So this is why we had to get the crash course in the Eka maps of the God World gates. Because if we didn't understand, if they started talking about we got to bring these pillars in from somewhere up there, out there, through there, it wouldn't have made a lot of sense. That's why they've given us this early. These teachings weren't due for a while. Like there would have been a lot of steps before we got here, but it became very important that we understood the basic creation mechanics and creation geography. Because this is what this is. This is the beginning of a geography course in the cosmos. And NASA should use these maps. They'd get further. You know? But what's nice too is this is the place we're moving into. Now it doesn't look like this when we get there. I mean, just like we're living right now within a shield that has a Christos and Crystalla and a Cathara grid and all of that, and we don't see it. You know, we're not standing on, oh, I'm on number one. You know, it's like a big hopscotch game. It's an amazing reality field here. It's the beginning of dimensional structure, but dimensionality works different at this level. You are beyond manifestation at this point. You're in pure consciousness at this point. Like, there's not bodies here. To get bodies, you have to spiral down to the next level, where this is setting the foundation for what becomes dimensionals. But this is where the original Merkaba fields first form as well. The Merkaba fields have to do with, oops, it's up on the ceiling now. You know, look up on the ceiling. Okay, these Ruche pillars. Now imagine like big straight pillars of invisible light and sound, okay? They each have, and I don't need this one yet, these 4 pillars. Now we can come down to here, please. Because of the center point, which is called the Manu window, it's an open space that leads right back into this field, the Manu field, the still point field. So the still point field there, this energy, comes up through here and creates what's called the Amareya flame. That's the eternal flame of life. And it comes up, and that's the center of the center Cathara grid. Now if you notice, the Christos Cathara grid is here between 6 and 7. Cathara center 6 and 7. On any Cathara grid, that space between, on the middle line, is the center point of the whole Cathara grid. It's also the center point of the Crystalla. So it's literally the center of the center of the center. In that point, the Manu field pulls up through the Mane field and the Ire field and comes up as an eternal flame. And it's called the emerald flame because it carries the, if you were going to translate these, because these are before light, so they don't have color technically, but their resonance, if you were to turn them into light, the Manet field is a gold, and the Ire field is a like pale silvery blue, and the Manu field is a deep, like azurite blue, actually. When you combine those, it gives you the effect of a blue-green emerald, deep emerald flame. So it's the emerald flame of eternal life. This is what the Emerald Covenant is about, and the Emerald Order of the Melchizedek Cloister. They're the speakers of the eternal flame. And within that flame, lots of other little flames or standing wave columns form. But that is the perpetual feed where the consciousness fields here that are stationary and eternal circulate, flow into the whole structure all the way down through the stairway and come back up and pass back through into the center. So this is our direct connection to Source. When we begin the process of activating the Amareya flame body, it means bringing back into awakeness not only our D12 divine prematter blueprint, it means opening this point in our own embodied Kathara grids to bring into our fields literally the frequencies of God, the closest expression that you can bring into the lower densities. So these are very sacred teachings, and if we didn't need them for emergency crisis intervention, we would have taken a good 12 years before they would have released some of this stuff, because people used to work really, really hard for very many years to build up to the point where they would be allowed to have that part of the knowledge. Because the more knowledge you get, there used to be a thing where there was time enough to take 12 years for each step of knowledge, and you'd integrate it, and you'd make it yours. When you hear knowledge, it's one thing, but making it your own is another, where you can remember it and you know it because you've become it and you live it. There used to be time in the old ascension schools where students who were trying to wake up again and remember who they were given 12-year blocks of time to integrate each level. We don't have that time now, because of crisis intervention issues. And that really, the Christ period was an attempt to begin that. So by the time we got to this period, we'd all be awake and know exactly what to do and how to run the Templar. But because of the interference that's been here, that has progressively invaded our history and our recorded history, every time the books are written, they were literally destroyed, and whatever could be used by the other side was taken and misused. We were told stories, that just this information was crucial to any group of beings who were appointed to being the guardians of a planet when the stargates were going to open, particularly if there was a chance of that planet falling into a black hole with a lot of help from its not too friendly neighbors. We were supposed to be awake by now. We were supposed to have lots of time. Our generations before us should have taught us all this, so we would have known it by now. But it didn't work out that way, even though it was tried. But we have the ability to wake up quick. That's what these workshops are about. That's why I get bombed with a lot of information all at once to the point where you go, what? What did I learn? What was the first thing we talked about? I don't even remember. Right? No, though, when we're discussing these things, you're getting the frequencies, even if you're not yet getting the full understanding on a logical level. Trust your shield and trust the other parts of your identity. They're absorbing it and they're holding it for you. This information is actually encoded into your bodies. I'm just here to remind you. He's just here to remind you. Mac's just here to remind you. Just like the Iani are just here to remind us, right? It's just a matter of reminding you what knowledge you carry right in your own cells, because all of this information is stored in your cells. When we work with these graphs, you can look at even the pictures of the Stairway to Heaven where they're all on one page. You can use that for a meditation tool. It is a mathematical program. It will begin to awaken the knowledge. So these graphs, there's a lot more to them than just pictures to show you things on the D3 level. You can meditate on them and they will start to help you speak to yourself. They will begin to wake up the parts of you that know this and a lot more that goes with it. So they're worth using. And you might want to blow them up, the ones that are in this particular book, because they're like microscopic. Well, I had to fit them all on one page. That wasn't easy to do. When we first made the Eka God World maps, we started with like a Kathara grid about this big, and then it grew, and it grew, and it grew. And I had to keep tape and paper together, and it was growing all over the table. Finally, it was this big thing I had to roll up because it was so huge just to get to the point where we could bring it from the tiny one up to this one. And then we reduced them all down so you could put them on 8.5 by 11 paper. So anyway, this particular level, the Akasha Aya level, is the first level of manifestation level, the first level of expressed creation, let's say. or manifest expression. The power that you can feel, the power of God that you can feel through just, imagine yourself projecting there. Imagine you're going up the stairway to heaven. And imagine that you're sitting there with 12 Ruche pillars around you, and you can feel the presence of the pillars, and you know that they are a form that God is taking right now. You are sitting in a reality that will be different for everyone. If we each visualize this, we'd each have different pictures. But we'd have the constant of knowing we have the Christos and the Crystalla grids, we have the Ire, Manu, and Mano fields with us. You know, we're in them. And we have these 12 pillars of conscious, living God energy. And all of it's God. And in that realization, there's a feeling, a wave of knowing that can come through you, that you are a part of that picture too. You are a shape that God is taking, just like the pillars are. So there's a personal relationship that each of us has with God and with the Mano and the Mane and the Ire. Some of us run more of the Mane, some of us run more of the Ire, some of us run more Manu. Okay? There's different balances of these energies in each of our bodies. Some are more inclined to the feminine, some are more inclined to the masculine, some are more inclined to the androgynous. These are manifestations of what your ray content is, how much more of which type of God energy you're running. But they're all God energy, and they're all equally valuable and equally powerful and equally good. So what happens with the Ruche pillars? This is where the pillars manifest within the Christos and Crystalla vibrational grids.
Do we have this in our book?
This one is in the Dance 4 program, I believe. It's in the, it's the top one. Let me see what's on the top of the stairway there. How far did we? The Stairway to Heaven one. Let me see that one. That was back a little bit. All right. Yeah. We went up this far, but we didn't give this much detail, I believe, is what is on the diagrams that you have the Stairway to Heaven one. This information and these big graphs are part of the Dance for Life and Dance for Love programs. So they're in the, yeah. Yeah, it is on there. Yeah. Yeah, you can put it, yeah, stick it up there. Yeah, that would be this one. Yep. Yeah. Yep. That's the Christos. That's the Crystalla inside of it, and that's the Mano, the Mane, and the Ire fields. So that's the top. But it's easy. There's more detail that we give. The whole thing is actually considered the Unisae, the point of all union, which is, the Unisae starts as those three circles within circles, the Mano, the Mane, and the Ire, and everything else exists within them. So the point, all of it, is the Unisae, when we refer to the Unisae. Yeah, I'm going to put this one back on for a minute because I want to explain what happens with the Ruche pillars. Now, I mentioned how here in the center is where the Manu comes through the Mane field and the Ire field and comes up and forms the Amareya flame, the emerald flame of eternal life. That's the combination of the frequencies of those three that come up, but it's a base Manu flame, which means it's primarily the Manu frequency, a still point flame. It's a still eternal flame. It's not a moving flame that moves from one place to another. It is just like if it were made out of concrete, it would be one big flame pillar, like a sculpture that just stands there, but it's not made out of concrete. It's made out of living conscious energy of source. And it is the combination of the three. So it is Manu, Mane, and Ire all together, which means it holds the divine trinity within it as well. It's not just the masculine or just the feminine, or, it's Manu, because Manu, if you put Mane and Ire together, it turns into the Manu field. Just like if you polarize Manu, it becomes the Mane and the Ire. Okay? So when those 12 Ruche pillars, they're up on the ceiling again, when they form in these positions within the Christos and Crystalla grid. They're in the Christos grid. They will run through the Crystalla too, but the Crystalla is actually at the center with the flame. Okay, the small Crystalla grid is at the center with the Amareya flame, and then from that, the 12 Ruche pillars emerge. And the pillars, because of the interaction of the frequencies or the consciousness of each of the pillars and the flame at the center, they all begin to bend toward the center flame. So instead of just standing as standing pillars, they begin to arc, like arcs of electricity. And they begin to arc, and those arcs begin to form cycles. Right? This is where movement becomes a phenomenon, or the experience of the movement of consciousness, let's say, becomes a phenomenon. Here, consciousness is still all sitting still and just kind of vibrating in place. Movement of consciousness from one space to another starts to come into being as these pillars arc in to interact with the Amaray flame at the center. And they form these cycles of moving energy. These cycles of moving energy are what begin the formation of Merkaba fields, the first Merkaba fields, and it's the first Merkaba fields that allow for the formation of the form constants, which are replicas of the spherical waveforms where you get those capsules around things. You have the Merkaba field, like when we were on the Stargate, when we were looking at how stargates are formed, where you have the two little triangles of the Merkaba field come together, and at the center there's a circle, the form constant, which is a bubble of energy. So literally through the interaction of the pillars with the flame, they arc and bend and begin to send pulses of consciousness. And this is like the beginning of electromagnetic force as well. It comes through in here. So this is the level where the first Merkaba fields, the first everything, foundations of the template for the entire hologram is set. And that template progressively replicates itself downward and steps down in smaller versions and smaller versions of itself to get us down to this level. So, anyway, what's the next one?